Chapter 376. Hearing this, Du Xiaofu's eyes trembled. He lifted his eyes slightly to look at Du Xiaofu and said, "Elder Liao. As far as I know, other than Ouyang Ling and Yuan Shanshan, your father was also close to two other people back then. One of them was Elder Liao." Murongxi said to Du Xiaofu, "Elder Liao and your father were friends who had risked their lives during their training outside the academy. Your father once saved Elder Liao's life, and Elder Liao had also blocked a blade for your father. 17 years ago, when your mother was giving birth, your father was besieged by the experts of your mother's clan. Only Elder Liao was by his side. In order to protect you and your mother, Elder Liao was seriously injured and fell off a cliff. Your father probably even thought that Elder Liao had died. Elder Liao managed to survive, and when he returned to the academy, he was on the verge of death. Although he recovered later on, in these 17 years, his cultivation has not improved at all, and there are still lingering injuries on his body." As he finished speaking, Murongxi looked at Du Xiaofu and said, "Now, do you still think that Elder Liao will purposely attack you?" Du Xiaofu's eyes trembled, and he remained in a daze for a long time. The evening mist grew thicker and thicker, and the darkness of night gradually pressed down on the entire mountain range. Between the mountain ranges, in the meandering rivers, the water surface was as black as ink. The golden ripples that had been tainted by the reflection of the setting sun had long since faded away by the darkness of night. On the majestic mountain peak, Du Xiaofu's figure appeared in front of a mountain courtyard. Gazing at the mountain courtyard, his gaze trembled slightly. He wanted to enter, but his steps seemed heavy. "What, you've been standing here for so long. Do you want me to come out and welcome you?" A voice rang out from the courtyard. As the voice faded, an old man in his 50s appeared in front of Du Xiaofu. Although he looked to be in his 50s, he was actually not that old. Logically speaking, he should be in the prime of his life. However, this old man had many wrinkles on his forehead and some stubble on his face, making him appear rather old. However, his eyes were extremely bright, and in this night, they seemed even more profound. This old man was the academy's Elder Liao. "Greetings, Uncle Liao." Looking at the old man in front of him, Du Xiaofu bowed deeply and did not get up for a long time. Elder Liao looked at Du Xiaofu and was stunned for a moment before he regained his composure and said to Du Xiaofu, "You don't have to be so courteous. Did Murongxi tell you that?" Du Xiaofu straightened his body slightly and nodded his head slightly, tacitly agreeing. "It's been 17 years in the blink of an eye. You've grown up." Elder Liao's gaze became gentle. His eyebrows drooped, and his face was kind. He looked at Du Xiaofu, and there was some sadness in his eyes. He seemed to be a little moist as he softly said, "When I first saw you, I knew who you were. You resemble your father too much. You and your father must have had a hard time over the years. I used to have a lot of..." Before Du Xiaofu could finish his words, Elder Liao interrupted him. He looked at Du Xiaofu and said, "You've already called me uncle, isn't that enough? Just don't cause any trouble in the academy in the future. For example, Qiangu Yu's family is extremely powerful." "Yes," Du Xiaofu nodded. He looked at Elder Liao, who had blocked a blade for his drunkard father and was on the verge of death in order to protect his family. Du Xiaofu's heart was filled with complicated emotions. He had actually thought that Elder Liao was deliberately targeting him. "Why are you so honest now? You don't seem to be an honest person." Elder Liao looked at Du Xiaofu in surprise. He was not used to Du Xiaofu's honest appearance. Du Xiaofu smiled bitterly and did not say anything. "How has your father been these years?" Elder Liao asked. In the pitch-black night, the moon was dim and the stars were bright. On the mountain peak, Du Xiaofu told Elder Liao a lot about his drunkard father's situation in the past 17 years. Du Xiaofu asked Elder Liao about many things in the past, mostly about his drunkard father and mother. "Uncle Liao, who were those people? What was their relationship with my mother? Why did they want to separate our family?" Du Xiaofu looked at Elder Liao. His clear eyes trembled. His resolute and determined face revealed a fierce expression. "Your father didn't tell you because he had his reasons. In fact, I don't know much. Elder Liao looked at Du Xiaofu and listened to the situation of the father and son in the past few years. He sighed and said, if you really want to do something, then work hard to cultivate and become an expert. There are some things that others are born with, but you have to fight for them. Absolute strength is the capital to fight for it. There is no such thing as fairness. Perhaps this is the fate of you and your father. I understand. Du Xiaofu took a deep breath. A fierce expression flashed in his eyes. It won't be long before the Tianwu University. Try to get into the top 10. Even though you destroyed Changgu today, it doesn't mean that you will be able to get into the top 10. Many people are strong enough to get into the top 10. When the time comes, there will be many dark horses. Elder Liao said. The next morning, the sky was slightly bright, the morning breeze was gentle, and the morning light was faint. Du Xiaofu's figure appeared outside the heavenly martial seal realm. He looked at the enormous mountain and the spotless ancient stone gate. His gaze moved slightly. The interior of the ancient stone door was hazy, and one couldn't clearly see what was inside. There was only an ancient aura slowly spreading out from the hazy space within the stone door. It was unknown how many years the Heaven Martial Talisman realm had stood there. The ancient aura was boundless and it made people feel reverence from the depths of their soul. Beside the ancient stone door, Du Xiaofu once again saw the large man who should be guarding the Heaven Martial Seal stage. He was still lying on a large rock beside the stone door and dozing off. He looked to be in his 40s and had a head of black hair that draped over his shoulders. His appearance could not be considered handsome, but his face was very clean. Du Xiaofu took out his points card and entered the Tianwu Seal realm. Du Xiaofu's points card had been reset to 0. However, after capturing a guy on the bounty list in the dark forest and capturing the ghost claw, the academy didn't reset his points. More than 600,000 points were in Du Xiaofu's points card. The main reason was that the reward for capturing the ghost claw was higher. Just as Du Xiaofu entered the stone door of the Heaven Martial Talisman zone, the middle-aged man on the stone slightly opened his eyes. The light in his eyes slightly moved on his clean face. He changed his posture and then continued to sleep. Within the hall of the Heaven Martial Talisman region, as Du Xiaofu strode in, the hazy edges of the stone door instantly emanated rippling lights. Talisman markings fluctuated, and spatial rifts that were like waves of air extended out. After that, a dazzling light appeared, and an ancient and boundless aura was emitted. The floating light was misty and dazzling, and it caused one to not dare look directly at it. It was as if he had passed through space and time. When the dazzling light disappeared, Du Xiaofu opened his eyes. He was already standing in the center of the hall. The space around the hall was fluctuating and dazzling. 3 spatial ripples appeared in front of him. They looked like 3 spatial gates. They were the spatial gates of the comprehension, combat and spirit realms. Du Xiaofu directly entered the comprehension realm. He wanted to comprehend it before the Tianwu Seal realm started. Although he had easily defeated Qinguyu yesterday, Du Xiaofu knew that many of the people on the martial ranking were not to be trifled with. He had to enter the top 10 in this Tianwu Seal realm. Therefore, he had to make some preparations. There were many separate spaces in the comprehension realm. Each space contained something that one wanted to comprehend. Demonic beast bones, the evolution of symbol arrays, the process of refining pills, the method of refining weapons, and the cultivation of martial skills. It all depended on the level of comprehension. Therefore, the points required were different. After stepping into the realm of enlightenment, Du Xiaofu once again appeared in the formless corridor of the Grand Tao. The surrounding space was emitting multicolored light, like the blooming of a comet in the void. Divine light covered the sky, and runes flickered everywhere. At first glance, many spatial ripples revealed the phantoms of demonic beasts, as well as fist techniques, palm techniques, sword techniques, blade techniques, and so on. There were also phantoms of array flags, spiritual stoves, and talisman cauldrons. The space was filled with mysteries. Rays of light flickered. It was illusory and blurry. The aura was ancient and boundless. Start comprehending. Du Xiaofu entered a spatial ripple that flickered with demonic beast phantoms. Following the fluctuation of the spatial runes, his figure also disappeared. As time slowly passed, the Tian Wuxil realm approached. The entire academy was in an uproar. As for the experts who had the strength to enter the top 10, they had all disappeared. The absolute experts on the martial ranking hadn't shown themselves recently. It wasn't hard to guess that they had all entered seclusion to prepare for the Tian Wuxil realm. As for the experts who knew that it would be very difficult for them to enter the top 10 of the Tian Wuxil realm, they didn't dare to relax. Even if they couldn't enter the top 10 of the Tian Wuxil realm, they still had to give it their all. The Tian Wuxil realm was also a big reshuffle of the martial ranking. The entire Stone Dragon Empire and even the surrounding empires were paying attention to the Tian Wuxil realm. If they performed well, it would naturally be beneficial for them in the future. During this period of time, there was news that the champion of the Tian Wuxil realm would be able to enter and comprehend for half a year. On top of that, he would also be able to obtain a weapon refined by Vice Principal Zhuge using the Profound Spirit Heavenly Vine as the main material. When the news spread, the entire Tianwu Academy was shaken. When the news spread, the entire Stone Dragon Empire was startled. Chapter 377. A spirit weapon forged by Zhuge Qiangbang was extremely rare. Not to mention that it was forged from the mysterious spirit Heavenly Vine, it was even custom-made. Its value was unimaginable. Rumors began to spread in the outside world, speculating that the spirit weapon Zhuge Qiangbang planned to forge this time would not be inferior to the Thunder Dragon from before. Within Tianwu Academy, in the last 5 days before the Tianwu Conference, another major event occurred within the Tianwu Talisman Realm battlefield. Some students saw Du Xiaofu's figure enter the battlefield, and not long after, the battlefield began to tremble. Rumble. Within the battlefield's 4th level, space began to tremble violently as a vast pressure descended. Du Xiaofu, 4-star initial spiritual talisman master, using his mental power to destroy a mysterious pulse spirit realm demon beast. Du Xiaofu, 4-star initial spiritual talisman master, using his fastest speed to set up a 4-star Permitha talisman formation. Du Xiaofu, 4-star initial spiritual talisman master, with the strongest physical body. Du Xiaofu, 4-star initial spiritual talisman master, using his fastest speed to break through to the 4th level of the combat realm. Within the battlefield, Du Xiaofu relied on his outstanding mental power and physical body to continuously break through to the 5th level. Using his cultivation as a spiritual talisman master, he continued to set records, causing the battlefield to tremble endlessly. As the news spread, many students within the academy rushed to spread the news, and all of them were shocked. While everyone was discussing, Du Xiaofu walked out of the battlefield himself, and under the shocked gazes of many, he once again entered the battlefield. In just a few short hours, the battlefield once again trembled. Du Xiaofu, initial spiritual pulse spirit realm, using his fastest speed to break through to the 5th level of the combat realm. The entire battlefield was in constant turmoil. Du Xiaofu found that as long as he did something that no one had ever done before, he would be automatically rewarded with a new record. This made Du Xiaofu unable to stop. I'll let you deduct my points. The space inside the battlefield is about the same as the array glyphs, so I should be able to break it. That huge rock should be pretty good too, I should be able to break it. Du Xiaofu was not in a hurry to break through the 5th floor of the battle domain. Instead, he looked around. In order to make up for the imbalanced points he had lost last time, he decided to earn back all his points. Perhaps this would make him feel better. Du Xiaofu, early pulse spirit realm. His physical body is the strongest. He shattered the 5th level with his physical body. Du Xiaofu, at the early stage of the pulse spirit stage. His fist strength is the strongest, able to shatter a 103,000 gene boulder with a single punch. A moment later, a dazzling light enveloped Du Xiaofu in the 5th floor of the battle domain. Lines of runes flickered on the light screen as Du Xiaofu broke one boring record after another. However, Du Xiaofu's points skyrocketed because of these boring records. The points on his card were about to explode, which made the smile on Du Xiaofu's face grow wider and wider. Heavens, how many records did Du Xiaofu create? This is crazy. I can't remember. I wonder how many records he created. It's said that when you set a record, you can get at least 1,000,000 points. Du Xiaofu's points must be terrifying. All the students in the academy were talking about Du Xiaofu. There was no doubt that not long after Du Xiaofu returned to the academy, other than crippling Guoming and Chen Guyu, he once again caused an uproar in the academy. That little bastard, is he trying to tear down the battle domain? Only a few elders were excited as they looked at the boring records left on the Battle Realm record board. That brat Du Xiaofu was simply trying to tear down the Battle Realm. That little bastard has always been brooding over his points. He's venting his dissatisfaction. Mu Rongxi smiled bitterly. It's about time. In the 5th floor of the battle domain, Du Xiaofu took a deep breath and looked at a towering mountain not far away. There shouldn't be much time left. Let's get ready to break through. Du Xiaofu mumbled. His expression turned serious as he walked towards the gigantic mountain peak. The closer he got, the more he felt that the mountain peak was terrifyingly huge. Du Xiaofu knew that there were a total of 4 stages on the mountain. At the foot of the mountain, there was a howling sky demon tiger. It was at the Beast Marquis stage and had already been defeated by him once. This time, Du Xiaofu's target was a heaven-devouring dragon at the waist of the mountain. It was at the Beast Marquis stage mystery stage. There was also a demonic ape at the Beast Marquis stage Nirvana stage. As for the martial Marquis stage expert at the peak of the mountain, Du Xiaofu wanted to test it out. However, he had to defeat the first 3 stages first. Roar! As Du Xiaofu appeared at the foot of the mountain, a howling sky demon tiger appeared in front of him. The howling sky demon tiger was over 100 feet tall. It was even bigger than the king's scaled demon tiger. The howling sky demon tiger was one of the top demonic beasts on the Earth Beast ranking. It was the closest to the Heavenly Beast ranking. It was extremely terrifying. You're here again. The huge howling sky demon tiger's eyes were cold and its body was extremely majestic. However, when it looked at Du Xiaofu, there was a hint of fear in its eyes. The howling sky demon tiger was destroyed by him last time. Du Xiaofu was not surprised to see it again. Everything here was still an illusion. Although the howling sky demon tiger was a half-spiritual creature and was not completely formed by the illusion, its body was still an illusion. It was half real and half illusory. After it was destroyed, it could be reformed. Not bad, I'm here again. Du Xiaofu smiled faintly. When he faced the huge howling sky demon tiger again, his state of mind was different from before. He did not feel much pressure. You passed last time. This time, you might not be able to pass. Roar! The howling sky demon tiger's roar was extremely shocking. It caused one's soul to tremble. It was as if the mental strength in one's mind was about to be shattered. Its huge body circled around Du Xiaofu one step at a time. The howling sky demon tiger was about to pounce on Du Xiaofu. It was extremely ferocious. With every step it took, the ground cracked. However, under the effect of the illusion, the cracked ground began to recover. You can't stop me. Du Xiaofu smiled faintly. He continued to let the howling sky demon tiger's shadow circle around him. His face was as calm as ever. When the howling sky demon tiger circled behind Du Xiaofu for the second time, it suddenly moved in a ferocious posture. Roar! The tiger's eyes were ferocious. The huge tiger's body directly pounced. Its huge tiger claws swept out like lightning. Dazzling symbols flashed, as if it could tear apart the sky. In an instant, it appeared above Du Xiaofu's head. You're not enough now. Du Xiaofu shouted in a low voice. He suddenly turned around, and a lightning-like light flashed in his eyes. His robe fluttered, and his aura was incomparably domineering. His 5 fingers clenched into a fist, and golden talisman patterns surged. His fist seemed to have grown eyes, and suddenly bombarded the tiger claw. His aura erupted like a volcano. Rumble. A terrifying muffled explosion sounded out. The huge howling sky demon tiger's claws were immediately shattered into cymbals. Du Xiaofu's fist smashed it at the foot of the mountain. Continue. Du Xiaofu did not stop. His expression slightly changed as he looked at the mountainside of the huge mountain. His figure flashed and immediately flew into the sky. When Du Xiaofu defeated the howling sky demon tiger, it was a tough battle. He even had to use the pressure of the golden rock against the beasts. Coupled with his full strength, he was barely able to defeat it. But now, facing this howling sky demon tiger, Du Xiaofu did not need to expend much energy to defeat it. A moment later, on the mountainside, there was a cliff that seemed to be carved by knives and axes. Huge rocks were stacked on top of each other, like a stone forest. Du Xiaofu's figure flashed down and saw a huge dragon that was dozens of feet long. Its body was tightly coiled around a huge stone pillar that was hundreds of meters tall. Its entire body was dark green and its aura was terrifying. It was like the king of beasts. This huge dragon was the heaven-devouring dragon. In terms of bloodline level, it was definitely not inferior to the Xianyun scarlet dragon. Its aura is so strong. Du Xiaofu was slightly surprised. The aura of the heaven-devouring dragon was really extraordinary. It was much more powerful than the howling sky demon tiger. Kid, you may be able to pass the first round, but you may not be able to pass this round. Go down. The heaven-devouring dragon spoke in human language. The dragon's huge eyes looked at Du Xiaofu with extreme disdain and contempt. You'll know once you try. Du Xiaofu raised his eyes slightly. He waved his hand and clenched his fist. Golden talisman runes began to surge out from his body. His aura skyrocketed, and he immediately threw a punch at the heaven-devouring dragon. You overestimate yourself. The heaven-devouring dragon shouted. Its huge dragon body suddenly spun around like lightning. Its huge tail was like a heavenly pillar, carrying a terrifying aura that seemed to be able to shatter space. It suddenly collided with Du Xiaofu's fist. Bang! Du Xiaofu's fist was hit by the dragon's huge tail. It was as if his fist had landed on a hard steel plate. His arm was slightly numb. The physical defense of the heaven-devouring dragon was extremely terrifying, especially the small dark green scales on its body. It was like a natural protective armor. As if seeing that Du Xiaofu was not pushed back, the heaven-devouring dragon's expression was cold. Its throat slightly roared, and its huge body swooped down. On the dense dark green scales all over its body, runes surged. Its aura suppressed the sky, and it was about to crush Du Xiaofu. Chapter 378. Du Xiaofu's lips curled into a cold smile as he leapt into the air to battle the heaven-devouring dragon. Rumble, terrifying sonic booms rang out as energy surged like giant waves. Like a landslide, large chunks of the surrounding boulders were smashed into dust. After dozens of moves, the heaven-devouring dragon was still locked in battle. The dragon's gaze grew more and more anxious. Its huge body soared into the air as its giant tail lashed out at Du Xiaofu like lightning. Humph! Du Xiaofu did not dodge at all. With a wave of his hand, a seal formed in his hand. The faint roar of a dragon could be heard from within his palm, and then a scarlet cloud dragon phantom formed. The rune shadow of the Xianyun scarlet dragon was the Xianyun scarlet dragon beast ability that Du Xiaofu had comprehended from the Xianyun scarlet dragon's mysterious bones. With astonishing power, it directly struck the heaven-devouring dragon. Bang! The two collided, causing a rumble in the air as endless runes exploded. The heaven-devouring dragon let out a long roar as its huge body soared into the sky. Its eyes were filled with shock as its giant tail was knocked back. It seemed to be surprised that Du Xiaofu could actually use the Scarlet Cloud Dragon Beast ability. But in just a short instant, the heaven-devouring dragon seemed to be enraged. The dark green scales all over its body glowed like lightning, and its aura suppressed the sky, shocking one's soul. Roar! The heaven-devouring dragon roared, its gaze sharp and shocking. Its huge body was like a thunderbolt as it crashed towards Du Xiaofu. Sky-shaking wings. Du Xiaofu's eyes surged with battle intent as he waved his hand. His palm was like a cattail leaf fan, and wherever it passed, layers of golden runes and mysterious runes appeared. A domineering and fierce aura erupted like a volcano. The aura of the golden-winged rock surged as he slapped his hand directly onto the heaven-devouring dragon's body. Boom! The muffled sound of energy caused the runes to bloom brightly. The heaven-devouring dragon actually managed to resist such a terrifying force. At the same time, the sky-devouring flood dragon's huge tail circled and whipped, descending directly like lightning. Finally, the flood dragon's body was like a spinning top, its huge body circling in the air and enveloping the space around Du Xiaofu. The runes surged, and its aura suppressed the sky. The enormous heaven-devouring dragon crushed the space, making it difficult for Du Xiaofu to move. Roar! The heaven-devouring flood dragon roared. It opened its bloody mouth as if it was going to swallow the sky. The flood dragon's divine might made people tremble in fear. Countless dazzling runes erupted from its mouth, and its aura suppressed the world. It was extremely terrifying. The heaven-devouring flood dragon seemed to want to swallow a part of the space. In the blink of an eye, it swallowed Du Xiaofu, who was being suppressed, into its mouth. Peng descends to the 9 heavens. Just as Du Xiaofu was sucked into the heaven-devouring flood dragon's ferocious mouth, golden light bloomed around his body. The wings on his back suddenly condensed, carrying the domineering will of the golden-winged rock race. It was as if a real golden-winged rock had descended. Powerful and domineering, the terrifying aura overflowed the sky. Du Xiaofu flapped his wings and swept across, as if he wanted to destroy the sky. Finally, like a golden-winged rock, he flew out of the heaven-devouring flood dragon's mouth and destroyed everything in his path, directly shattering the huge heaven-devouring flood dragon. Rumble! The sonic boom was like thunder, bursting with a series of dazzling runes. In the earth-shattering sound, the space around them seemed to be shattered. The huge heaven-devouring flood dragon was also shattered, and the surrounding boulders collapsed. Stomp stomp, Du Xiaofu's figure landed on the ground and staggered back a few steps. His face was pale, and his eyes were filled with shock. The heaven-devouring flood dragon's phantom was at the mysterious beast realm, but compared to Ghostclaw's strength, it was definitely not inferior. Fortunately, he had made some progress in his comprehension these days. Otherwise, it would be extremely troublesome to deal with it. Continue, looking at the peak of the mountain, Du Xiaofu once again flew into the sky and directly flew to a higher peak. Kid, in the past 3 years, you are the 3rd person who could reach here. But in the end, you still couldn't break through. Get lost. On the peak of the mountain, in the middle of a boulder, a red demonic ape wrapped in fiery red runes stood tall. Its huge body was looking at Du Xiaofu with a fierce and domineering gaze. It's actually the raging inferno demonic ape. Du Xiaofu was rather surprised. He did not expect that the guardian of the 3rd stage was actually a terrifying raging inferno demonic ape. The raging inferno demonic ape's bloodline was even stronger than the Xianyan scarlet flood dragon and the heaven-devouring flood dragon. Its strength was extremely terrifying. It was rumored that the most terrifying raging inferno demonic ape could burn the sky and dry up rivers. Although the raging inferno demonic ape was only at the nirvana realm of the beast marquis realm, it was absolutely terrifying. Even an expert at the perfect martial marquis realm would find it difficult to deal with a raging inferno demonic ape at the nirvana realm. Since I'm here, I have no intention of retreating without a fight. Feeling the terrifying aura of the demonic raging inferno demonic ape, Du Xiaofu's fighting spirit was greatly aroused. The aura around his body was not held back at all as it rolled out. A domineering and fierce aura rolled out around his body. So you are only at the pulse spirit realm. Then get lost. The raging inferno demonic ape's temper seemed to be extremely fiery. Its huge body suddenly pounced towards Du Xiaofu. The blazing aura around its body spread out. The fiery red runes were like raging flames jumping. Everywhere it passed, the temperature was extremely hot. Roar! The raging inferno demonic ape leaped and its body rose into the air. Then, like a meteorite falling from the sky, it blasted a punch towards Du Xiaofu. Rumble, as the raging inferno demonic ape punched out, the red runes in front of its fist turned into rolling flames. Like a fire dragon sweeping down, the waves of fire were monstrous. Then, a terrifying wave of fire swept towards Du Xiaofu, wanting to directly engulf Du Xiaofu's body. With just one attack, the raging inferno demonic ape's power was unparalleled, as if it swept through the sky. It was far from what the heaven-devouring flood dragon below could contend against. Rock descends to the 9 heavens. Du Xiaofu's eyes narrowed slightly. He directly activated the rock descends to the 9 heavens, carrying the domineering will of the golden-winged rock. He flapped his wings and whistled, sweeping away a large area of raging flames. His figure swept into the air, avoiding the rolling flames. Ah, this is the aura of the Rock Clan. You are a human, how can you have it? The raging inferno demonic ape was surprised, but it did not stop at all. Its huge palm directly slapped towards Du Xiaofu. Rolling flames soared dozens of feet into the air, occupying the sky. Du Xiaofu waved his hand. His hand seals were like a palm leaf fan. Layers of golden runes and mysterious patterns were slapped out, resisting the raging inferno demonic ape's attack. Thump, thump, as his figure landed, Du Xiaofu was shaken to the point that the rocky ground was crushed one after another. Finally, he hit a huge rock to stabilize his body. The terrifying strength of the raging inferno demonic ape was absolutely terrifying. Roar! The raging inferno demonic ape roared and beat its chest with its fists. The sound waves were sonorous like the sound of a heavenly drum. Then, its huge body flew across the sky and chased after Du Xiaofu. Where it landed, the rocky ground cracked and huge rocks rolled down. The golden rune wings on Du Xiaofu's back flapped and avoided the raging inferno demonic ape. Golden runes and mysterious patterns erupted all over his body. He did not dare to resist directly and could only make use of the opportunity to counterattack. However, the effect of Du Xiaofu's counterattack was not very good. He was even more suppressed by the raging inferno demonic ape. He was suppressed by the raging inferno demonic ape's rune flames. However, relying on the wave-like free steps and the speed of the golden-winged rock technique, in addition to his terrifying physical body, Du Xiaofu managed to resist hundreds of moves. Kid, it's time to go back. The raging inferno demonic ape roared with a powerful aura. Scarlet runes enchanting around its body like raging flames. In the end, it condensed into a huge fireball that was dozens of feet in size. Countless flames erupted and its aura surged. It burned the surrounding space until it was distorted. With a loud bang, it pressed towards Du Xiaofu. The terrifying fireball was terrifying. Its aura made people tremble. Wherever it passed, the blazing aura caused the space to rumble and whistle. The blazing storm around the fireball swept across the sky like a tornado. Sand and rocks flew everywhere, causing the huge mountain peak to be in chaos. It shook violently, huge rocks rolled, and sonic booms were endless. Roar! Du Xiaofu's hand seals condensed. In an instant, the runes on his hand dazzled and spread out. A scarlet cloud dragon and a mad demon sky wolf respectively rushed out to block the terrifying fireball. Walala, however, under the impact of the terrifying fireball, the scarlet cloud dragons and mad demon sky wolf's phantoms did not last long. They were destroyed like dry weeds and smashed into pieces under the terrifying flames. Roar! Du Xiaofu shouted loudly. His shout was like the roar of a dragon, like the cry of a divine elephant. His purple robe fluttered in the wind, and the entire mountain peak trembled. Cracks spread out on the rocky ground, and a palm print immediately shot out to meet the attack. Rumble! In an instant, the sky exploded with a rumble. It was as if the heavens and the earth and the mountain peak were about to explode. Dazzling runes spread out. Chi-la-la! Du Xiaofu's body was ruthlessly smashed into the rocky mountain wall. Under the terrifying aura, he was in an extremely sorry state. His clothes were tattered, his hair was disheveled, and his face was deathly pale. Roar! The Inferno demonic ape roared. Its body stood tall like a small mountain. It was obvious that it was still suppressing Du Xiaofu. However, at this moment, its eyes were filled with shock. This demonic ape is too strong. I'm not looking for a beating. Du Xiaofu decided not to continue fighting with the demonic ape. There was no need to continue fighting. He would come back another day. The time was almost up, so he did not want to miss the Sky Martial Conference. Monkey, I'm leaving first. I'll come back another day. Du Xiaofu's voice fell, and he immediately left without hesitation. In any case, he really could not do anything to the monkey now. Looking at the retreating Du Xiaofu, the Inferno demonic ape's eyes were filled with doubt. However, it only waited on the mountainside and did not chase after Du Xiaofu. Walala, as Du Xiaofu left, the mountainside that was in a mess suddenly began to strangely recover. The rolling boulders also returned to their original position as if time had reversed. It was as if nothing had happened. Chapter 379. Translator, H2DH2 Mr. Every level of the battlefield had a safe zone. Inside the safe zone, one would not be attacked. However, once one reached the safe zone, one's points would still be deducted from one's point card every 24 hours. That monkey's beast energy is extraordinary. It should be good if I can comprehend some of it. Du Xiaofu hurriedly retreated to the safe zone, still thinking about the Inferno demonic ape's attack. He had gained a lot from the battle just now, and was extremely shocked by the Inferno demonic ape's beast energy. Standing in the safe zone, Du Xiaofu's eyes slightly raised. He looked around and muttered, I should be able to destroy this safe zone. I wonder how many points I'll get. As his voice fell, Du Xiaofu's lips curled into a smile. Profound energy immediately surged through the meridians in his body. Profound energy surged through all the acupoints in his body and finally gathered in his fist. As his profound energy surged, a terrifying aura spread out like a volcanic eruption. He directly punched the spatial ripples in the safe zone. Bang bang bang! A series of thunderous booms suddenly rang out. Waves of powerful energy waves continuously crashed into the safe zone like stormy waves. The surrounding sand and stones were sent flying, and cracks appeared on the ground. The entire fifth level of the safe zone began to shake. Rumble rumble rumble, finally, the safe zone of the fifth level of the battlefield was directly blasted apart by Du Xiaofu, and the entire battlefield shook. Du Xiaofu, initial pulse spirit stage cultivation, destroyed the fifth level of the battlefield. Du Xiaofu, initial pulse spirit stage cultivation, the person who has set the most records in the history of the battlefield. As Du Xiaofu destroyed the safe zone of the fifth level of the battlefield, a divine light instantly enveloped the battlefield. A record was set, and another record was directly broken. The entire battlefield shook, and the aura caused everyone to tremble in fear. Swish swish, Du Xiaofu took out his point card. The number on the card began to soar crazily, and finally stopped when it reached 53,678,530 points. I'm rich, I'm rich. I must first go to the battlefield and exchange it all for pills and natural treasures. Otherwise, the academy will deduct it again. Du Xiaofu was ecstatic. Over 50 million points was an enormous number. It was probably enough to exchange for anything he wanted. He had definitely struck it rich this time. He couldn't help but think to himself, who asked you to deduct my points? Now you can't find any other reason to deduct them. I must exchange them for natural treasures. Rumble rumble rumble. Just as Du Xiaofu was ecstatic, the space trembled, and a mighty explosion spread out. Then, a line of rune characters appeared on the record board again. At the same time, an indifferent and emotionless shout rang out, Du Xiaofu maliciously destroyed the safe zone of the battlefield. His character is vile. His points will be erased and he will be expelled from the battlefield as punishment. The next time he commits this offense, he will be banned from the battlefield forever. What does this mean? Erasing my points and expelling the battlefield? What does this mean? Du Xiaofu's eyes widened as he stared at the rows of runes. Before he could react, the space around him suddenly trembled. Then, a terrifying and dazzling ray of light came crashing down. Under the tremendous force, Du Xiaofu was struck by lightning. His body trembled, and before he could react, his vision turned black. Then, he felt the space around him tremble. Finally, his body seemed to have fallen somewhere and stabilized. Then, he opened his eyes. In the hall of the Heaven Martial Talisman battlefield, there were many figures entering and exiting the Spirit Realm, Battle Realm, and Enlightenment Realm. Suddenly, the entire battlefield trembled, and a pressure spread out. Many people's eyes trembled. That kind of change was caused by someone setting a new record or breaking a new record. It was a shocking commotion that could only be caused. Then, everyone in the hall clearly heard the loud shout from the battlefield. Du Xiaofu maliciously destroyed the safe zone of the battlefield. His character is vile. His points will be erased and he will be expelled from the battlefield as punishment. The next time he commits this offense, he will be banned from the battlefield forever. His points will be erased and he will be expelled from the battlefield as punishment. Before everyone in the hall could recover from their shock, dazzling runes surged in the surrounding space. Under everyone's attentive gazes, they saw a purple figure being directly blasted out of the battlefield by a huge force, ruthlessly smashing into the hall. It's really Du Xiaofu. He was expelled from the battlefield. Everyone looked at the figure with a broadsword on his back. Who else could it be but Du Xiaofu? Everyone immediately guessed in their hearts. What exactly did this guy do in the battlefield to be directly expelled by the battlefield? At this moment, Du Xiaofu opened his eyes and saw that the surrounding gazes were curiously looking at him. He immediately got up from the hall and his gaze immediately looked at the points card that he was holding tightly in his hand. The 53 million points in the card instantly turned to 0. It was completely erased by the battlefield, and not a single point was left. The demon extermination sword Li Yuxiao's figure appeared beside Du Xiaofu. He had just come out of the Enlightenment Realm when he heard and saw this shocking scene. His faint red eyes looked at Du Xiaofu's 0-point card and weakly asked Du Xiaofu, "Are you okay? Why were you expelled by the battlefield? What exactly did you do in there?" Looking at the 0 points in the card, Du Xiaofu wanted to cry but had no tears. He was in heaven a second ago, and in the next second, he fell into hell. He really wanted to rush into the battlefield to settle the score with the battlefield, but he was afraid that the battlefield would really ban him from entering. Hearing Li Yuxiao's question, Du Xiaofu didn't know what to say and almost suffered internal injuries. He sighed and said, "My hands are stupid, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life." As his voice fell, Du Xiaofu was so sad that he didn't want to say any more. He put away the point card and walked out of the Heavenly Martial Talisman Realms Hall. Don't be so sad. Isn't it just erasing your points? It's not a big problem. The Heavenly Martial Assembly is about to begin. When you enter the top 10, you won't need to enter the Heavenly Martial Talisman Realm anymore. Li Yuxiao chased after Du Xiaofu and patted his shoulder. He comforted Du Xiaofu, who was too weak to even walk. Du Xiaofu looked at Li Yuxiao and almost bled. What did he mean by erasing his points? That was 50 million points. It was gone just like that, and it was erased by the battlefield. He didn't even have a place to complain. Forget it, don't comfort me. I want to be alone. Du Xiaofu looked at Li Yuxiao and said. He was so sad that he didn't even want to say anything. Who is Jingjing? Is there such a person in the academy? When Li Yuxiao heard this, he immediately became curious and asked. When Du Xiaofu heard this, he looked at Li Yuxiao. His eyes were wide open and he was about to vomit blood. Several hours later, in the quiet valley, Du Xiaofu wanted to see how the little tiger was doing. However, he unexpectedly saw Yangshuang and his big sister Du Xiaoman here. Big brother, what's wrong? Are you unhappy? Seeing Du Xiaofu's dejected appearance, Du Xiaoqing immediately went up and intimately held Du Xiaofu's arm and asked. Phew! Du Xiaofu took a deep breath as he gazed at that pure and innocent face, and then he patted the back of Du Xiaoqing's head. He squeezed out a smile on his face and said, "It's nothing. My hand was a little cheap. It's all in the past." "That's good." Du Xiaoqing immediately felt relieved. "Are you all right?" Oh, Yang Shuang walked up and leaped onto the rock Du Xiaofu was standing on. Her big and beautiful eyes were filled with worry. "I'm fine." Du Xiaofu shook his head. Since he had already lost over 50 million points, there was nothing else he could do other than to let go of his worries. If he had known earlier, Du Xiaofu would have never destroyed the safe zone. At that time, he still had tens of millions of points. Now, he had nothing left. "It's good that you're fine. To be able to capture Ghastly Claw and destroy the Qiangu Jade, you're indeed formidable." Du Xiaoman smiled faintly. Her ethereal eyes were filled with shock, but more than that, she was happy. Looking at the purple-robed youth in front of her, Du Xiaoman's beautiful eyes were filled with gratification and happiness. In such a short period of time, her third brother was no longer that foolish youth from the Stone City. Unknowingly, he had transformed into this youth who had shocked the entire Tianwu Academy and suppressed many experts on the martial ranking. His name had shaken the academy and resounded throughout the empire. "Big sister, you've come out of seclusion." Du Xiaofu smiled faintly. Then, to his surprise, he discovered that the aura on his elder sister's body had improved by quite a bit. Her strength had probably broken through from the mysterious level of the Pulse Spirit Realm to the Nirvana level of the Pulse Spirit Realm during this seclusion. "I've just come out of seclusion and the Tianwu Assembly is coming soon. You have to strive to enter the top 10. At that time, I'll tell my father and second uncle the good news. They will definitely be happy for you." Du Xiaoman said with ripples in her eyes. With her third brother's current strength, she estimated that he had a high chance of entering the top 10. Hearing Du Xiaoman's words, Du Xiaofu asked in astonishment, "Big sister, are you returning to the Stone City?" "Yes," Du Xiaoman nodded and said to Du Xiaofu, "I haven't gone back for many years, so I want to go back and take a look. After the Tianwu Assembly, I'll make a trip back to the Stone City." The four of them chatted until dusk. Du Xiaoman had always been curious about Du Xiaoqing's identity. However, she did not ask Du Xiaofu about it. She only asked Du Xiaofu to prepare for the Tianwu Assembly 3 days later. Chapter 380. At this time, the entire academy was talking about the Heaven Martial Assembly. The news of Du Xiaofu being expelled from the Heaven Martial Assembly and his points being erased had also spread throughout the academy. This was definitely the biggest joke of all the students. Of course, in this kind of joke, the majority of the crowd was absolutely shocked. Du Xiaofu had set a new record in the battlefield all by himself, all of which represented his terrifying strength. Who would really take this as a joke in their hearts? However, seeing such a famous figure like Du Xiaofu being beaten to the point of vomiting blood in the battlefield undoubtedly made the other students feel much better. What could be happier than seeing such a dazzling fellow suffer? Within the academy, there were even people secretly guessing how many points had been erased from Du Xiaofu's point card. Looking at Du Xiaofu's expression when he exited the Heaven Martial Seal Zone, it was likely that a lot of points had been erased. "Ha ha ha ha, I'm dying of laughter. Serves that brat right. Over 50 million points erased and banished. This time, that brat probably wants to die. Destroying the safe zone. Only that brat could think of something like that. This time, he shot himself in the foot. I'm dying of laughter." In the dark night, in a large hall, many academy elders were chatting. The group of elders led by Mu Rongxi, Elder Liao, Elder Shengguan, and Elder Gongsun were all laughing heartily. If Du Xiaofu saw that this group of elders actually had the time to laugh at him, who knew what he would think? Early in the morning, after dawn, warm sunlight spilled through the dense foliage and through the windows, forming specks of golden light in the room. "Who?" The white light around Du Xiaofu retracted as he stopped cultivating. A mouthful of turbid qi spurted out from his mouth, his clear eyes shining brightly. Early in the morning, gazing into the distance from the chore area, the majestic mountains in the distance were covered in a golden coat under the sunlight, appearing exceptionally magnificent. In a small hall, Wu Qingfeng, Zhang Wei, and Sun Ji were sitting diagonally. "Boss, number 2, how many points do you think number 3 was erased yesterday? Was it around 10 million? Some experts on the martial ranking guess that number 3's points might be in the tens of millions. Sun Ji leaned back in his chair, his entire body lazily lying on the chair. 10 million points, that was definitely a shocking number. Who knew how many astonishing pills and treasures could be exchanged for with that amount of points in the spirit realm? I don't know, it might not be that much. Otherwise, we can ask number 3 later. Zhang Wei said, his gaze filled with interest. Wu Qingfeng shook his head. Number 3's number 9's day, God's day is snow. Excuse me, is there anyone here? 5 Sun Ji's Zhang Wei, Zhang, Sun, and Sun Ji's Zhang Wei's, Sun Ji, Zhang's Sun Zhang, and Sun Zhang's, Zhang Zhang's S Lu. Wu Qingfeng, Sun Ji, and Zhang Wei stared at the girl at the door. Her light blue dress fluttered slightly, like a light blue flower blooming slightly. A pair of watery eyes could be seen on her rosy and alluring face. Heavens, it's Du Yinxin. Why is she here? When the three's gazes landed on the girl before them, their eyes instantly trembled. How could Wu Qingfeng, Zhang Wei, Sun Ji, and the rest not recognize the young lady in front of them? Du Yinxin had always been ranked within the top 3 amongst the freshmen. She was the most influential person amongst the freshmen, causing all the male students to secretly want to get close to her. However, it was said that Du Yinxin never got close to any boys, so naturally, no one had the chance. At this moment, Wu Qingfeng and the others had never imagined that the great Du Yinxin would actually appear in their dormitory, and in the chores area at that. Does Du Xiaofu live here? Du Yinxin politely asked Sun Ji and the others while the 3 were still in a daze. Are you looking for me? Before Du Yinxin could finish her words, the door to Du Xiaofu's room opened, and his figure stepped out into the small living room. Looking at Du Yinxin standing outside the door, his clear eyes flickered with a hint of emotion. Although Du Xiaofu could be considered as one of the new students, due to his cultivation, he did not have much contact with the new students. He was more familiar with the older students from the previous batch. However, Du Xiaofu had seen Du Yinxin before, and had even exchanged blows with her before. When he first entered Tianwu Academy, Du Xiaofu had exchanged blows with the top 10 new students, and Du Yinxin was one of them. I'm here to look for you. Seeing Du Xiaofu, Du Yinxin's eyes flickered with a hint of emotion on her rosy face. Her voice was still gentle as she said softly, "Can I find a place to talk to you alone?" Looking at Du Yinxin, he recalled what his elder sister Du Xiaoman had said. Back then, his drunkard father was very close to the Du household, and this Du Yinxin was a member of the Du household. Only then did Du Xiaofu nod his head and reply, "Okay." After a while, in the back mountain, mist rose between the mountains, and milky white gauze separated the mountains. The hazy shadows of the mountains looked like a refreshing landscape painting from afar. "Is there something you need from me?" On the mountain peak, Du Xiaofu took a deep breath of fresh air, and asked Du Yinxin curiously. Du Yinxin gracefully bowed with a smile in her eyes and said, "Du Yinxin greets brother Xiaofu." "Brother, when did I become your brother?" Du Xiaofu's eyes were filled with astonishment. "According to seniority, you are my cousin." Du Yinxin looked at Du Xiaofu, a hint of doubt in her beautiful eyes. Her eyes were watery as she looked at Du Xiaofu and said, "Could it be that the Stone City Du family did not tell you about the relationship between the Stone City Du family and the Du household?" "No." Du Xiaofu shook his head. His eldest and second uncles had never mentioned it, and his drunkard father even more so. It was only from his elder sister Du Xiaoman that he learned that the Du household and his drunkard father were very close. "It seems that you still don't know. Your father, Uncle Tingxian, also did not seem to have told you," Du Yinxin said. Hearing this, Du Xiaofu's eyes suddenly became vigilant. This Du Yunxin actually knew the identity of his drunkard father. This made Du Xiaofu have no choice but to be vigilant. Du Yunxin slowly raised her head and looked at Du Xiaofu. Her eyes indicated that Du Xiaofu did not need to worry. She said, "Brother Xiaofu does not need to be nervous. The Du household and the Stone City Du family are originally one family. The Stone City Du household is a branch of the Du household, and the Du household is the main family. We are originally one family, and the blood that flows in our veins is the Du family's blood. Main family, branch family." Du Xiaofu was quite surprised. He did not think that the Stone City Du household and the Du household were actually one family, and even a branch family of the Du household. "You can go back and ask when you have time. I will not lie to you." Du Yunxin pursed her lips and smiled. She said, "Actually, I already knew that you came from a branch family. It's just that your identity is a bit special, so it's not easy to greet you." Du Xiaofu was half believing and half doubtful. Although he felt that this could be true, he still held a bit of vigilance. He asked, "Then why did you come to greet me again today?" "Because in 2 days is the Sky Martial Assembly. I came to cheer you on. You must enter the top 10. If there's a chance in the future, I'll take you to the Du household." After pausing for a moment, Du Yunxin continued, "That is the main family. One day, you will belong there. Good luck. I'll leave first. If I have time, I'll come find you again." Du Yunxin looked at Du Xiaofu. Her voice faded, her dress lightly swayed, and her beautiful figure leapt away. "Main family, branch family," Du Xiaofu murmured. If the Du household and the Du household were really branch family and main family, then why did Big Sister tell him not to trust the Du household too much? "Seems like I have to ask Big Sister clearly," Du Xiaofu said in his heart. Compared to Du Yunxin, Du Xiaofu naturally trusted Big Sister Du Xiaoman more. Chi. Just when Du Xiaofu was about to leave the mountain peak, his bosom suddenly rippled. The surrounding energy of heaven and earth suddenly changed. A golden light shot out from his bosom, and immediately turned into a sky full of runes that floated in the air. The energy fluctuated, and the surrounding space rippled violently. Rumble, along with the dazzling runes shining, a terrifying aura erupted. It was as if it could sweep across the 4 directions and suppress everything. It stirred up a large space ripple, and a faintly discernible phantom of a 5-fingered mountain peak emerged from the runes. Is Du Xiaoyao breaking through? Du Xiaofu's eyes trembled. Du Xiaoyao, who had been silent for so long, finally had a reaction. And now, she seemed to be breaking through. He immediately became vigilant in the surroundings. The terrifying aura calmed down after a long time. The dazzling runes converged, and finally turned into a little golden macaque. This little macaque's skin was crystal clear, but its hair was brightly colored. Its long and dense eyelashes were slightly curled up, and its light golden eyes were intelligent to the point that it was hard to fathom. It added a mysterious feeling, and it also revealed a noble temperament. It was the redbone horse monkey that Du Xiaoyao had transformed into. I'm finally out. Du Xiaoyao converged her aura, and suddenly, the mountain peak surged. There was a faint golden mark in the shape of a 5-fingered mountain peak between her eyebrows. It flickered like a flame, adding to its mysteriousness, and then slowly converged. About 2 hours later, Du Xiaofu arrived at the Weapon Institute. "Junior Du, you came at the right time. I heard that you were expelled from the War Realm yesterday, and your points were also erased. What happened?" Chapter 381. Du Xiaofu had just arrived at the weapon department when he bumped into Han Chao at the entrance to the small hall. When Han Chao saw Du Xiaofu, he immediately asked with great interest. Looking at Du Xiaoyao on Du Xiaofu's shoulder, he was also rather curious. He asked, "Junior Du, what kind of Yao beast is this? Is it your pet beast?" Du Xiaofu had no choice but to reply, "It's nothing, just a bit of luck." Du Xiaofu did not mention Du Xiaoyao's identity too much. Junior Bingna, Junior Tu Tong, where are you going? Come over and meet Junior Du Xiaofu. Just as Du Xiaofu finished speaking, two figures, one male and one female, arched their backs slightly at the entrance to the small hall. They seemed to be about to sneak out, but were immediately discovered by Han Chao. Senior Han Chao. The man and woman straightened their bodies and squeezed out a smile on their faces. They immediately walked towards Han Chao and Du Xiaofu. The woman looked to be around 21 or 22 years old. Her hair was tied up in a ponytail, and she wore tight clothes that outlined the curves of her body. Her face was also extremely delicate and pretty. Although she could not compare to Ouyang Shuang, Gu Xinyan, or Wu Kei, she was still pretty good. The man was about the same age as the woman, but he was not as tall as the woman. His body was rather sturdy, and his face was also rather clean. Junior Du, let me introduce you. These two are Junior Bingna and Junior Tu Tong. They can be considered your seniors. Han Chao introduced them to Du Xiaofu enthusiastically with a smile on his face. Greetings, senior sister and senior brother. Du Xiaofu nodded. From what Han Chao had told him, there were only 4 people in the entire weapon department. Other than himself and Han Chao, there were 2 others. They should be Bingna and Tu Tong. Observing Bingna and Tu Tong, Du Xiaofu secretly glanced at them. Female blacksmiths were rare. It was said that Bingna had always been in seclusion to study blacksmithing. Tu Tong seemed to be in the same situation. The last time he went into seclusion, he didn't show up for 3 months. Perhaps he had just come out of seclusion 2 days ago. So you're Du Xiaofu, Junior Du, I've heard about you a long time ago. Looking at Du Xiaofu, Bingna faintly smiled. Her eyes then fell on Du Xiaofu's shoulder and Du Xiaoyao's broadsword. She was also surprised. Tu Tong looked at Du Xiaofu's shoulder and Du Xiaoyao's broadsword. He looked at Du Xiaofu with shock in his eyes and said, I heard you crippled Chang Guyu and Guoming and captured the Ghost Claw. You're really strong. You've won a lot of glory for our weapon department. Good job. Du Xiaofu smiled faintly. He didn't know what to say. However, he felt that Bingna and Tu Tong were quite easy to get along with. They didn't have the arrogance of the other seniors. They were very friendly. Senior Han Chao, I still have something to do. You can have a good chat with Junior Du, I'll be leaving first. After Bingna finished speaking to Han Chao, she gave Du Xiaofu a wink before leaving in a hurry. She didn't dare to look back. Senior Han Chao, Junior Du, I also have something to do. Let's chat another day. Tu Tong was afraid that he would be a step too late. He also left in a hurry. Sigh, Junior Bingna and Junior Tu Tong are too impatient. They are always in a hurry. As a weapon talisman master, this kind of impatient temperament is quite unfavorable. Gazing at Bingna and Tu Tong's backs, Han Chao said unhurriedly. Then, he turned to Du Xiaofu and said, Junior Du, where did Junior Li Shui go after looking for you that day? It seems like you two have a close relationship. Junior Du, is that a sword on your back? Why is it on your back? Junior Du, you haven't told me if this little macaque is your pet. Du Xiaofu finally understood why Bingna and Tu Tong left in a hurry. No wonder they often chose to go into seclusion. Perhaps it was definitely related to Senior Han Chao. Senior Han Chao, I still have something to look for Vice Dean Zhuge. I'll chat with you later. After he finished speaking, Du Xiaofu immediately left in a hurry. He didn't dare to be held back by this Senior Han Chao. This was only his 3rd meeting with Senior Han Chao and he couldn't take it anymore. Du Xiaofu recalled that Bingna and Tu Tong had been facing each other for more than 3 years. It wasn't hard to imagine why they would rather go into seclusion. Perhaps if he were to meet them, he would also choose to stay in seclusion. Why are you so impatient? As a weapon talisman master, this isn't good. Looking at Du Xiaofu's back, Han Chao said unhurriedly. In the valley courtyard, Du Xiaofu went to look for Zhuge Qiangbang. However, after arriving at Vice Dean Zhuge's courtyard, he discovered that there was a defensive talisman matrix set up outside the courtyard. There's a talisman matrix. Should we go in? Du Xiaoyao asked Du Xiaofu. Ordinary talisman matrices were naturally ineffective against him. We can't go in. Let's go. Du Xiaofu shook his head. Most likely, Vice Headmaster Zhuge was in seclusion and had set up a talisman formation outside to avoid being disturbed. If they went in, they would most likely disturb Vice Headmaster Zhuge's seclusion. Originally, Du Xiaofu wanted to see Vice Dean Zhuge and learn some forging techniques. However, he could only leave now and come back next time. However, Du Xiaofu didn't return to the dormitory in the chore house. Instead, he returned to the courtyard he had chosen in the Weapon Institute. He also told Wu Qingfeng, Zhang Wei, and Sun Ji that he might often stay in the Weapon Institute in the future. After all, the Weapon Institute was much quieter. With Du Xiaoyao and Little Tiger there in the future, the Weapon Institute would be much more spacious and easier to arrange. Most importantly, the Weapon Institute was extremely quiet. It was much better for cultivation. There wouldn't be any disturbances and he could cultivate without any worries. The Sky Martial Assembly was in 2 days, and Du Xiaofu wanted to spend the last 2 days quietly comprehending. It could be considered his final preparations. The courtyard was surrounded by mountains and rivers, and the scenery was lush and verdant. On the bed, Du Xiaofu calmed himself down and sat down cross-legged to adjust his breathing. With the Tianwu conference approaching, all of the students could feel the pressure and competition. An intense atmosphere could be vaguely felt rising in the academy. The Tianwu conference was the most intense and large-scale competition in the entire Tianwu Academy. Only students on the martial ranking were allowed to participate. Just this condition was enough to exclude most of the students. Only students on the martial ranking were allowed to participate, and they represented the top 100 students of Tianwu Academy. Only they were qualified to participate in the competition. Tianwu Academy's martial ranking attracted the attention of the entire empire and even the neighboring empires. Any student on the Tianwu Academy's martial ranking would be able to rise to prominence after stepping out of the academy. There were countless martial marquis who dominated a region. It was said that half of the martial king realm experts in the Stone Dragon Empire came from Tianwu Academy. How shocking was that? Although only the top 100 students on the martial ranking were allowed to participate, it didn't dampen the enthusiasm of the other students. Being able to see the rarely seen experts on the martial ranking gather together and have a fiery duel, such a scene was extremely attractive to all the students. It might even be able to enlighten them. Some of the top experts on the martial ranking had already been selected by many students to enter the top 10. Bujian Shanhe General, Ling Xian, Gu Xinyan, Ghost Child, Netherworld Princess Wu Kei, Heaven Luo Sword, Gui Xiaofeng, and the others were all anticipated. It was a must-see duel. The experts on the martial ranking were all waiting for the start of the Tianwu Assembly. They were waiting for the start of the Tianwu Assembly to shine. As for the other students, they were waiting for the start of the Tianwu Conference. It was already noon the next day and the scorching sun was high up in the sky. In the courtyard by the mountain, Du Xiaofu's body was enveloped in a mystical white light. The white radiance was like a divine radiance, and an oppressive aura spread out. It was not difficult to detect that the oppressive aura was rapidly increasing. At this moment, the speed at which the aura was increasing was enough to stun other soul symbol masters. A few hours later, a strange energy fluctuation suddenly appeared in the room. Not long after the ripple was emitted, a powerful aura suddenly surged out from Du Xiaofu's body, whose eyes were tightly shut. Boom! In an instant, the white divine radiance enveloping Du Xiaofu's body became extremely dense. His aura was also constantly increasing. In an extremely short period of time, he broke through an invisible bottleneck. All of a sudden, an ancient aura reached a new height. Walala, in the room, the white divine radiance around Du Xiaofu's body spread out along with the aura in his body. The aura was ancient. When the aura completely stabilized, it gradually disappeared into his body. Following a long breath of turbid air from his throat, Du Xiaofu's eyelashes trembled slightly. His tightly closed eyes slightly opened, and the light in his eyes became brighter and deeper. A 4-star talisman master is mysterious. Feeling the mental energy in his mind's Naiwan palace, a smile appeared on Du Xiaofu's face. From 8:00 until 12 o'clock, 2 chapters of the manuscript were only recovered because the WPS crashed. That kind of feeling, even collapse and wanting to die are not enough to describe. Let's not talk about it anymore. The more I talk about it, the more tears I will cry. At 6:00, Xiao Yu continued to write. There are more chapters, but brothers, save them for tomorrow. Don't delay your rest, I'll go cry first. Chapter 382. Tianwu Academy. Tomorrow was the Tianwu conference. Today was the last day to challenge the martial ranking. On the last day, the dozens of rankings on the martial ranking had changed. However, due to the restrictions, there was no way for others to challenge the martial ranking. No one dared to challenge those who were slightly stronger than them. One must know that if one were to offend an expert who was ranked at the top of the martial ranking, the consequences would be unimaginable. If one couldn't defeat the martial ranking, being ridiculed would be a light punishment. In the worst-case scenario, one would be severely injured and the gains would not make up for the losses. Even if one were to challenge the martial ranking, they had to find someone who was on par with them. Otherwise, they would be overestimating themselves and looking for a beating. The sky gradually darkened. On the Peace Plaza, when the last challenge ended with the challenger winning, many spectating students decided to return and wait for the Tianwu conference to begin tomorrow. I didn't expect Dai Ji to defeat Lu Shuangpeng and enter the last place on the martial ranking. Dai Ji was originally unremarkable. However, he had been cultivating diligently for the past few years. I didn't expect him to enter the martial ranking. I've finally entered the martial ranking. On the plaza, a skinny young man with a faint trace of blood at the corner of his mouth looked at the setting sun with excitement and joy. To this young man, it was impossible for him to enter the top 10 tomorrow. However, to be able to participate in the Tianwu conference and enter the martial ranking was enough for him to be proud of when he returned to his clan. Swoosh, suddenly, a figure streaked across the sky. A faint golden light flickered around the figure as it streaked across the sky like a golden rainbow. In the end, the figure landed beside the skinny young man in the middle of the plaza. The faint golden light receded, and a young man in a purple robe appeared in the field. His figure was straight, and his purple robe fluttered slightly. He had a resolute and handsome face, and his eyes were clear. There was a little golden macaque on his shoulder, and a broad sword wrapped in purple cloth on his back. Du Xiaofu. It's Du Xiaofu. Why is Du Xiaofu here in the Peace Plaza? With the appearance of Du Xiaofu, the figures who were about to leave immediately returned. Pairs of eyes immediately fell on Du Xiaofu. In the square, Du Xiaofu looked at the thin young man in front of him, and the corners of his mouth curved into a smile. He asked softly, "Senior, what's your name? Did you just win the challenge?" Looking at the sudden appearance of Du Xiaofu, Dai Ji was stunned for 2 breaths before coming back to his senses. Dai Ji had naturally heard of and paid attention to this young man who was the most dazzling amongst the new students and had even overshadowed the older students on the martial roll. Hello, Junior Du, my name is Dai Ji. I just defeated my opponent and entered the top 100 of the martial ranking. Dai Ji replied, but his gaze was rather uneasy. His tongue was slightly numb when he spoke, and he stuttered. You're challenging someone else today, which means that no one has challenged you yet. In that case, according to the Academy's rules, I can still challenge you, right? Du Xiaofu had a smile in his eyes as he looked at Senior Dai Ji, who had just entered the martial roll, and spoke very sincerely. You still want to challenge me? When he heard Du Xiaofu's words, Dai Ji's entire body trembled as his hairs stood on end. He had never imagined that he would encounter such a maleficent existence at the final moment when he had just entered the martial ranking. That's right, I want to challenge you. I have no choice. I still lack a ranking on the martial roll. I'm really sorry. Du Xiaofu smiled, but he felt rather helpless. Previously, he had crippled Guoming because he had helped Ouyang Xuan. Then, he had severely injured Qin Guyu because of a duel. It had nothing to do with the martial role. So until now, Du Xiaofu was still not on the martial roll. Tomorrow's Tianwu conference could only be attended by those on the martial roll. At the last moment, Du Xiaofu could only come to the Peace Square to ask for a ranking. Coincidentally, he had encountered the unlucky Dai Ji. Du Xiaofu wants to challenge Dai Ji. Dai Ji is in trouble. Upon hearing Du Xiaofu's words, the surrounding students could only mourn for Dai Ji. The academy's rules stated that the challenged only had to accept one challenge per day. However, there was no rule that stated that the challenger could reject the challenge after challenging the opponent. Therefore, they could only mourn for Dai Ji. However, the result was beyond everyone's expectations. Originally, everyone was still guessing that Dai Ji would be defeated by Du Xiaofu in a few moves. However, they did not expect Dai Ji to choose to surrender with a depressed and aggrieved expression. He had no intention of fighting with Du Xiaofu at all. "Thank you very much, senior." Dai Ji directly surrendered. Du Xiaofu smiled. As soon as he finished speaking, he stomped his foot on the ground and immediately left. That night, Du Xiaofu's name finally appeared on the martial roll. However, it was the last 100th place. Even Ouyang Xuan was at the 91st place. Due to Qin Guyu's death, his name was naturally removed from the martial roll. Therefore, all the rankings on the martial roll moved up by 1 place. The Tianwu conference is finally about to begin. Late at night, in the courtyard, the general looked up at the sky. Under the cover of the moonlight, his faint bronze skin glowed in the night. His facial features were clear and deep, and his eyes were filled with fighting spirit. "You've all been waiting for tomorrow for a long time." Under the moonlight, Gu Xinyan slowly walked out of the pavilion on the mountain peak. Her body was light and tender, and it would not be an exaggeration to say that it was perfect. Her beautiful eyes shone brightly. "Tomorrow, I will fight with all of you." On the towering mountain peak, a dark red robe fluttered in the wind. On Li Yuxiao's smooth and fair face, there was a hint of red light in his jet-black eyes, making one's heart tremble when they looked at him. Under the curtain of night, the mountain range was continuous. There was a mountain peak with towering rocks, and on top of the precipitous cliff, there was a pavilion bathed in the moonlight. Below it were deep ravines, and the bottom of the ravine couldn't be seen. Soft mist drifted about, and in this moonlit night, everything was quiet. Ghost Child sat in the pavilion, and under his feet was the cliff. He gently held a woman in red in his arms. He slightly raised his head, and his facial features were clear as if they were carved. His appearance gave off an unrestrained feeling, but the light in his eyes made people dare not underestimate him. The faint aura on his body rippled, and a little evil aura spread out, which made people unconsciously feel a chill in their hearts. Tomorrow is the Tianwu conference. Is there any hope for first place? The woman in red slightly raised her head from Ghost Child's arms. Her bright red clothes covered her body, and her white jade-like breasts were gently pressed against Ghost Child's body. It was Princess Yuming. "Wu Quebec, first place is too difficult." "It depends on luck," Ghost Child said softly. His voice was gentle, but there was a hint of fierceness. He gently stroked Wu Kei's waterfall-like black hair. "Between the general and Gu Xinyan, who will win tomorrow?" Wu Kei's big eyes were charming, but her face was elegant without makeup. "There is one more person. That ferocious boy will be their absolutely formidable opponent," Ghost Child said softly, and there was a bitter smile at the corner of his mouth. Looking at Ghost Child, Wu Kei smiled faintly. Her entire body gave off a soft and tender feeling. She said softly, "I also think that the ferocious guy will be their formidable opponent tomorrow." "We might not have much to do tomorrow," Ghost Child said softly. Ghost Child said softly. He looked at the face in front of him, and some emotions surged in his eyes. He bent down and lowered his head. On his handsome face, his lips gently landed on those tender and alluring red lips. Wu Kei seemed to want to say something, but she could no longer speak. Then her hands wrapped around those sturdy shoulders, and her strength became tighter and tighter. Tomorrow, we will know whether those little fellows are dragons or worms. The champion of the Tianwu Assembly will receive a weapon personally refined by Vice Principal Zhuge using the mysterious spirit Heavenly Vine. I wonder who will receive it. In a quaint and secluded little courtyard, several elders spoke softly. This night was exceptionally long for many people, but it was also exceptionally short for some people. But no matter what, after one night, under many expectant gazes, dawn finally arrived. Dawn was like a sharp sword that split open the silent night, ushering in the first ray of dawn. The faint radiance illuminated the mountains. At this moment, many students in the academy retracted their hand seals and opened their eyes. Their auras surged. Swoosh swoosh, following which, figures leaped up from various parts of the academy and headed straight for the Peace Plaza. The odd job area, the freshman area, the seniors area, and so on. Figures headed there one after another, and their auras surged, causing ripples in the air. The Tianwu Assembly was undoubtedly the grandest event in Tianwu Academy, and no one wanted to miss it. They had been waiting for it for a long time, and today, it was finally going to begin. In the Weapon Institute, in a courtyard that was surrounded by mountains and rivers, a purple-robed youth sat cross-legged with the violet-gold heavenly tower on his back. The ancient white glow around his body slowly retracted, and his eyelashes fluttered. His tightly shut eyes abruptly opened, and a bright light flickered in them. A mouthful of turbid air was spat out from his mouth. Looking at the sunlight outside the window and sensing the unusual movements in the academy, a smile appeared on the purple-robed youth's face. Within his clear eyes, a faint golden glow flickered. His battle intent began to rise, revealing a domineering aura. He muttered in a low voice, "Champion of the martial ranking. It's 7:00 today. I'm going to continue crying." Chapter 383. This time, the Heaven Martial Assembly was directly linked to the martial ranking. After tidying up, Du Xiaofu and Du Xiaoyao left the courtyard. Just as they were about to leave the weapon department and head to the Peace Plaza to participate in today's Heaven Martial Assembly, they saw Han Chao, Bing Na, and Tu Tong. "Junior brother Du, you should be participating in the Heaven Martial Assembly, right? You're a student of the weapon department, so the three of us will accompany you. Although there aren't many of us, we represent the entire weapon department to cheer for you." Han Chao was as enthusiastic as ever when he saw Du Xiaofu. "Our weapon department has always been suppressed by the other departments. This time, we'll have to rely on you to help our weapon department vent our anger," said Tu Tong. His small body was very sturdy, and the light in his eyes could not be underestimated. "Good luck, everyone in our weapon department will support you," said Bing Na with a smile. Bing Na said with a smile. She then looked at Du Xiaoyao and said softly, "What a cute monkey." Hearing this, Du Xiaoyao completely ignored these words, pretending not to have heard them. Looking at Han Chao, Bing Na, and Tu Tong in front of him, Du Xiaofu felt a sense of familiarity. He nodded and the four of them headed to the Peace Plaza. The Peace Plaza was usually the place where new and old students of the academy challenged each other. Any grand event of the academy would also be held in the Peace Plaza. Early in the morning, figures from all over the academy had already arrived. Before the sun had completely risen, the surroundings of the plaza were already filled with countless black heads. Among the densely packed and bustling crowd, there were many sounds of discussion. The sound waves spread in all directions. There were even more people than the people from the Divine Light Court who had come to cause trouble last time. The Heaven Martial Assembly was attended by all the students of the academy. Adding to the fact that the Heaven Martial Seal Realm had closed last night, all the students who had been in seclusion had come out and gathered today. When Du Xiaofu, Han Chao, Bing Na, and Tu Tong arrived at the Peace Square, they weren't surprised to see the dense crowd. To Du Xiaofu, the people at the Mu family's auction house were not inferior to them. However, the difference was that the talents of the new and old students in the Peace Square could not be underestimated. When they walked out in the future, they would definitely be able to shock everyone. The crowd at the Mu family's auction house could not be compared to them. Of course, there were many top-notch experts at the Mu family trading company's auction that day. Brother. As the crisp voice rang out, Du Xiaoqing's butterfly-like figure fluttered over. Her gaze then landed on Du Xiaoyao. Ripples appeared in her pure and innocent eyes, as if she had sensed something. Du Xiaoyao looked at Du Xiaoqing, her pale golden spirit eyes moving slightly. Then, she said in a low voice, "Your bloodline is not low. What a cute macaque. Brother, can you give her to me to play with?" A short moment later, Du Xiaoqing returned to normal. That faint feeling disappeared and she no longer cared. Instead, she began to have her eyes on Du Xiaoyao. "Little girl, I'm your brother. How dare you not respect me?" Du Xiaoyao immediately glared at Du Xiaoqing. He had already learned about Du Xiaoqing's identity from a chat with Du Xiaofu yesterday, so he wasn't surprised. Hearing Du Xiaoyao speak, Han Chao, Bing Na, and Tu Tong were all stunned. Du Xiaoqing was no exception. She then looked at Du Xiaoyao in confusion. "You're clearly a macaque. How can you be my brother?" "Girl, he's your second brother, Du Xiaoyao," Du Xiaofu said with a smile as he stroked Du Xiaoqing's hair. "No, I'm the big brother, not the second brother," Du Xiaoyao immediately said. Du Xiaoyao immediately said. He was clearly much older than Du Xiaofu. If Du Xiaoqing called him that, it would undoubtedly make him shorter in front of Du Xiaofu in the future. Du Xiaoqing looked at Du Xiaoyao, then at Du Xiaofu, and finally at Du Xiaoyao, second brother. "Little girl," Du Xiaoyao immediately glared at Du Xiaoqing. "Don't worry about it. You're the second brother," Du Xiaofu said with a smile. "You're the second brother," Du Xiaoyao glared at Du Xiaofu and said grumpily. As Du Xiaofu and Du Xiaoyao bickered, several more figures slowly walked over. Du Xiaoman and O Yangshuang were at the front, followed by LV Jiaxue and Zhang Lu. Du Xiaofu was familiar with the two of them, so he nodded at them in greeting. "We should go in," O Yangshuang said to Du Xiaofu after arriving beside him. "Do your best. I'll cheer for you. You have to make it into the top 10, Du Xiaoman said. "Okay," Du Xiaofu nodded at Du Xiaoman before following O Yangshuang to the square. Du Xiaoyao did not follow them. Her eyes moved slightly, and in the end, she landed on Du Xiaoqing's shoulder. "Second brother, are you a beast? A monkey?" Du Xiaoqing looked at Du Xiaoyao curiously and asked. "Your second brother, I?" "No, I'm your eldest brother. I'm not a beast, nor am I a monkey." Du Xiaoyao was about to break down. How could everyone think that he was a monkey? "But you're clearly a monkey. If you're not a monkey, then what are you?" Du Xiaoqing blinked her innocent eyes and asked unrelentingly. Du Xiaoyao stared helplessly at Du Xiaoqing and said, "If you say another word, I'll tell Du Xiaofu not to bring you out to play in the future." "All right." Du Xiaoqing clicked her tongue and immediately stopped talking. O Yangshuang led Du Xiaofu to the side of the square, where there was a special passage for the martial role students. It was less crowded, so they could easily enter the square. O Yangshuang whispered to Du Xiaofu, "Senior Li Shui told me to tell you that she's gone back to Jia. See you if you have the chance in the future." "Why did she go back?" Du Xiaofu was surprised to hear this. "You destroyed Chen Guyu." She probably felt uneasy and wanted to personally escort Chen Guyu back. O Yangshuang sighed softly and said, "I'm afraid that once she goes back, the family behind Chen Guyu will definitely come looking for her. She might be in a lot of trouble then." I tried to persuade her, but she insisted on sending Chen Guyu back. "I hope she's fine. I hope she's fine," Du Xiaofu said softly. Although this matter was related to him, he did not regret it in his heart at all. After a while, Du Xiaofu followed O Yangshuang to the center of the square. The square was densely packed with people outside a yellow line. It was obvious that the center of the square was where the Tianmu assembly would be held today. The spectators were unable to get close. At the center of the square, there were already 80 to 90 young men and women standing there. They were all extraordinary people, and every one of them was an outstanding existence among their peers. They're all on the martial roll. You should have seen some of them already. As for the others, you'll naturally get to know them in the future. But today, they're all your opponents, including me. Oh, Yang Shuang said softly. Du Xiaofu smiled as he stared at the group of young men and women. Indeed, they were all extraordinary. Among them, Luo Tianchen, Zhu Ding, Xiang Tianyin, Bing Qianli, Qin Lang, Guo Qing and the others were all ranked on the martial rankings. It's Du Xiaofu. I heard that Du Xiaofu was on the martial roll yesterday. Du Xiaofu, do your best. Following Du Xiaofu's arrival, many of the spectating students began to discuss. There were even supporters who began to shout loudly. The martial roll experts who had already arrived also turned to look at each other. Luo Tianchen, Bing Qianli, Guo Qing and the others passed through the crowd and nodded at Du Xiaofu. As he listened to the bustling noises around him and gazed at the experts on the martial ranking in front of him, Du Xiaofu's heart began to burn with excitement. 10 years of being a foolish young master had made Du Xiaofu's mind much more mature than his peers. It had also cultivated Du Xiaofu's tenacious and resolute character. The training in the dark forest and the savage beast mountain range had also allowed Du Xiaofu to gradually develop a domineering will and a decisive character. But when all was said and done, Du Xiaofu was only 17 years old now. At this moment, it was impossible for a 17-year-old youth to remain unmoved when facing the experts on the martial rankings of the entire academy and this grand event that countless powers of the empires were paying attention to. How confident are you in getting into the top 10? Oh, Yang Shuang asked as she looked at the smile on Du Xiaofu's face. Her large and beautiful eyes blinked as she looked at Du Xiaofu and asked. Getting into the top 10 shouldn't be a problem. My goal is to get first place. Du Xiaofu smiled. Facing this kind of atmosphere, his heart was also filled with passion. He was quite confident about getting into the top 10. His final goal was naturally to get first place in the Tianmu assembly. Only by getting first place would he be able to obtain the weapon refined by Vice Principal Zhuge. Fighting for first place are General Buddy and Shanha, Fairy Maiden Gu Xinyan, Nine Nether Youth, Ghost Child, Princess Netherworld Wu Kei, and Qian Luo Sword Guo Xiaofeng. They are all formidable opponents. Oh, Yang Shuang pursed her lips and smiled. Hearing this, Du Xiaofu knew how powerful those fellows were. He smiled faintly and said, a lion will not hold back when hunting a rabbit. If they want to get first place, they will have to get my permission. As his voice faded, faint golden light flickered in Du Xiaofu's eyes, faintly revealing a domineering aura. It's Nine Nether Youth, Ghost Child, and Princess Netherworld Wu Quebec and Demon Extermination Sword Li Yuxiao. Mad Bull Mang Hao, who is even rarer than General Gu Xinyan, is also here. Ice Python Baichuan is also here. Look, Qian Luo Sword Guo Xiaofeng, Fairy Maiden Gu Xinyan, and General Buddy and Shanha are all here. On the special passage, silhouettes came out in a single file. Following the appearance of these silhouettes, the spectators all around burst into an uproar. Sounds of discussion and cheers converged together, resounding through the clouds. The atmosphere reached its first peak. Du Xiaofu looked in the direction of the gaze. Among those silhouettes, most of them were quite familiar. General Gu Xinyan, Ghost Child, Wu Kei, Guo Xiaofeng, Li Yuxiao, and the others all came together. There were also several young men with outstanding temperaments. Even when they walked together with General Gu Xinyan and Ghost Child, they were not suppressed at all. The aura around them was enough to represent their status and strength. Chapter 384. Translator, Transin Editor, Transin, you should know most of the others. The 6th on the martial roll, Mang Hao, the 7th, Bai Yichuan, and the 10th, Bai Mingfeng, the Fire Blade, and Chen Guyu, the Overlord Spear, are now 8th on the martial roll. You have to pay more attention to these 3. The others shouldn't be much of a threat to you, Ouyang Shuang whispered into Du Xiaofu's ear. Just as Du Xiaofu was sizing up the general and the others, Gu Xinyan, Ghost Child, Wu Kei, Gua Xiaofeng, and Li Yuxiao also looked at Du Xiaofu. They looked at each other with faint smiles on their faces. Do you think we'll have a chance to fight today? Last time, it wasn't fun at all. Demon Saber Li Yuxiao walked up to Du Xiaofu's side. Looking at the 100 or so people on the martial roll, he smiled and said, "But we'll have to send the others down first. I don't want to meet you at the start. I'll wait for you." Du Xiaofu's lips curled into a smile. Battle intent began to surge in his eyes. "What are you guys talking about? Are you guys going to team up?" Ghost Child and Princess Netherworld Wu Kei walked up to Li Yuxiao and Du Xiaofu's side. Their eyes glowed as they swept across the 80 or 90 experts on the martial roll who had arrived first. According to the rules, we'll have to eliminate a group of people first. When the time comes, we'll send those who aren't strong enough to make up the numbers down first, lest they get in the way and spoil the fun. That's what I was thinking. Li Yuxiao smiled faintly. A faint red light flickered in his eyes. Hearing this, Du Xiaofu listened to their conversation. From the looks of it, there were different levels on the martial roll. Those with similar cultivation levels would gather together. Based on one's strength, one would come into contact with different circles. You're Du Xiaofu, right? I heard you crippled Qin Guyu. That's quite ruthless. A young man in a white shirt walked up to Du Xiaofu. His eyes flickered with a faint light as he stared at Du Xiaofu. The gaze in his eyes was like that of a python, and the invisible aura around him was somewhat cold. Ice Python Bai Yichuan is friends with Qin Guyu. They once trained together, Yang Shuang whispered to Du Xiaofu. When Du Xiaofu heard this, he could guess Bai Yichuan's intentions, but he didn't reveal any of it. He looked at Bai Yichuan with his clear eyes and said, "Qin Guyu wants to fight, he's just not strong enough. I hope you can stay until the end. I also want to know how Qin Guyu lost." Bai Yichuan's expression did not change, but some displeasure that was difficult to detect flashed across his eyes. "If there is a chance, you will find out." Du Xiaofu looked straight at Bai Yichuan as he indifferently replied. "Bai Yichuan, he's not your opponent. I'm afraid you're still not strong enough. Don't embarrass yourself." Ghost Child glanced at Bai Yichuan indifferently. His sharp and cold aura fluctuated faintly. He did not take Bai Yichuan too seriously, as if he was standing up for Du Xiaofu on purpose. "Ghost Child, what do you mean?" Bai Yichuan looked at Ghost Child when he heard this. His expression was somewhat ugly. Although he usually did not place Ghost Child in his eyes, he instinctively felt some fear when he looked at Ghost Child. After all, Ghost Child's ranking was higher than his. He also knew how terrifying Ghost Child's strength was. Ghost Child means that you're not strong enough, so don't provoke people you shouldn't provoke. Qin Guyu deserved what happened to him. Just don't be the next one. A voice sounded out indifferently. Everyone in the surroundings immediately narrowed their eyes and looked over when they heard the voice. They saw a stalwart young man striding over. His face seemed like a statue, and his invisible aura seemed to occupy the sky and be able to suppress the mountains and rivers. He was the first on the martial rankings, the general of mountains and rivers. Bai Yichuan looked as if he wanted to say something as he stared at the general. However, in the end, he did not say anything. What else could he say in the face of the general who did not touch mountains and rivers? He could only secretly glance at Du Xiaofu as the corners of his eyes twitched slightly. Du Xiaofu looked at the general and smiled faintly in greeting. The general looked at Du Xiaofu and smiled faintly. "Do you think we'll have a chance to fight today?" Du Xiaofu raised his brows before smiling. He looked at the general and smiled. "If I have the chance, I'll give you a beating with all my strength." The general was stunned. He then looked at Du Xiaofu and frowned. "I'll do my best as well." While the people in the plaza were chatting, the surrounding spectators were filled with respect as they chanted the names of the experts one after another. Any student of Tianwu Academy was extraordinary in the outside world. Those on the martial ranking, especially the general of mountains and rivers, Ling Xian, Jade Maiden, Gu Xinyan, and the others, were existences at the pinnacle of the martial ranking. No one could shake their position. Facing these rare existences, regardless of whether the other students admitted it or not, they were filled with reverence and admiration for these existences at the pinnacle of the martial ranking. It was the same in Tianmu Academy as well. Buzz, suddenly, a melodious sound of a bell rang out in the noisy Peace Plaza. As the sound of the bell rang out, the noisy surroundings gradually quietened down. Swoosh swoosh, just as the sound of the bell rang out, many teachers stood respectfully in a corner of the plaza. There were over 30 chairs in front of them. Dozens of figures flew through the air and appeared in front of the chairs. Powerful auras spread out. They were Elder Sun, Elder He-Hu, Elder Liao, Elder Murong-Shi, and the others. Today, 3 old men stood in front of Elder He-Hu, Elder Liao, and the others. They looked to be in their 70s or 80s. Although their figures looked old, they were brimming with vitality. The invisible aura rippling from their bodies caused one to tremble the more one looked at them. Martial kings, 3 martial kings. Du Xiaofu's gaze suddenly trembled. The auras of the 3 old men were all martial kings. Their auras were not inferior to the Medicine King, Mu Mingqing, and the others. They are the inner courtyard's first elder, second elder, and third elder. They rarely show their faces in the Tianmu assembly. It is said that within the inner courtyard, there are some elders who are always in seclusion. They rarely show their faces in public, even if they are in seclusion for tens of years or even tens of years. Ouyang Shuang lowered her voice and whispered into Du Xiaofu's ears. She had unintentionally heard this from Uncle Shi when they were chatting. As expected of the Tianmu Academy, which has thousands of years of history behind it, Du Xiaofu was truly moved. Only now did he truly understand Tianmu Academy's background. It was no wonder that the powers in the surrounding empires and dark forest did not dare to provoke Tianmu Academy. The ones they truly feared were the terrifying elders in the inner academy. Those inner institute elders rarely showed themselves in public for dozens of years. Outsiders had no idea how many of them there were. Each of the inner institute elders had endured for dozens of years, or even dozens of years in solitude, cultivating in seclusion. No one knew how powerful they had become, so no one dared to provoke them. Just as Du Xiaofu was sizing them up, a gray-robed old man with shoulder-length white hair stepped forward. He was the inner academy's first elder that Ouyang Shuang had mentioned earlier. The great elder walked out and glanced at the tens of thousands of spectators around the Peace Square. His old voice rang out, "The Sky Martial Arts Assembly is held once every 20 years. The martial arts ranking will participate. The same rules apply. In the first round of elimination, everyone will attack. Whoever defeats their opponent will get 1 point. In the end, 20 people will enter the second round of elimination. The person with the highest points will fight the person with the lowest points. The last 10 people who win will enter the Sky Martial Arts Seal Realm to cultivate for half a year." The first elder paused for a moment before continuing, "The Tianmu Assembly this time is a little different. The final champion will be chosen, and the champion will be given a weapon personally forged by Zhuge Zhuge using the profound spirit Heavenly Vine. During the competition, no one is allowed to intentionally harm others, or else they will be severely punished. Those who lose will have to leave the stage, or else bear the consequences." As the first elder's words fell, a dazzling rune suddenly blossomed on a huge jade wall at the corner of the plaza. On the jade wall, there were 100 rankings. The first place was a dazzling golden light, and that was the general. The last place was a dazzling rune, and that was Du Xiaofu. This jade wall was a miniature version of the martial ranking. Chilala, on the plaza, the top 100 experts of the martial ranking were staring at the miniature version of the martial ranking. They wanted to advance further on the martial ranking. In the following elimination round, the battle intent in their gazes swelled, and waves of aura quietly fluctuated. The first elder's right arm shook, and his gray robe fluttered. His aged voice immediately resounded throughout the Peace Plaza, "The Tianmu Assembly will now begin." Boom! As the first elder's voice fell, the aura of the top 100 experts of the martial ranking soared into the sky, and the entire Peace Plaza rumbled. In the air, there was a faint gust of wind and clouds. That aura was soul-shaking, and many elders were moved. At the same time, the elders all moved back and sat down. On the plaza, the experts of the martial ranking moved, and spread out. Waves of shocking aura surged into the sky. The hearts of the spectators rippled, and their eyes trembled. The battle that they had been waiting for so long had finally begun. The Tianwu assembly was about to begin. Chapter 385. Buzz Buzz. 100 auras surged and rippled in the air, causing the sound of wind and thunder to faintly resound in the air. At this moment, all the experts on the martial ranking in the Peace Plaza were on high alert. A large amount of profound energy enveloped the plaza as various colored profound energy surged out like fireworks. It was a magnificent sight. Defeat as many opponents as you can. According to the rules of the Grand Meeting, the more opponents you defeat in the elimination round, the higher your points will be. The second round will be much easier, Ouyang Shuang said beside Du Xiaofu. Walala, in the crowd, there was a tall and sturdy young man. Dark green profound energy surged around his body to form a protective armor. A terrifying aura spread out from his body, shaking the air and causing many of the surrounding youths to tremble in fear. He was Wild Bull Mang Hao, ranked 6th on the martial ranking. Attack! Wild Bull Mang Hao gave a loud shout. His entire body was wrapped in a dark green profound energy armor, and his aura was like that of a wild bull. He immediately leapt up, directly pouncing towards a youth in long robes not far away. The place where he landed shattered the limestone floor of the plaza. Boom! Wild Bull Mang Hao punched out. Wrapped in runes, it was as powerful as thunder. Dark light flickered around his body as a dark green light lingered around him. His punch fiercely smashed out, causing the ground to crack. Pucci, the young man in long robes, was directly blasted away and fiercely smashed into the distance. Blood spurted from his mouth and he could no longer stand up. On the shrunken version of the martial ranking, Du Xiaofu's name instantly rose by 1 place. The last one was the young man in long robes. He was the first to be defeated and directly became a cushion on the martial ranking. Rumble, following Wild Bull Mang Hao's attack, a great battle was about to break out. Waves of auras erupted, shocking the entire plaza. Demon Extermination Sword Li Yuxiao attacked. Demonic aura surged as his dark red robes fluttered, causing people's hearts to palpitate. Chi 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 Chi. Guo Xiaofeng attacked. His body was wrapped in a profound energy halo as runes spread out from his palm. Although his palm seemed light, it was actually incomparably powerful. Ghost Child's gaze locked onto a well-dressed young man. A cold and sharp aura fluctuated as his figure appeared in front of the young man like a ghost. The release of his aura was enough to make the young man's soul tremble violently. Netherworld Princess Wu Kei made a move. Her delicate body that seemed as if it had no bones contained extremely terrifying energy, and her aura surged and swept through the sky like a storm. Bang! Gu Xinyan's eyes shone brightly. There was a young man in a long robe in front of her. After exchanging blows, he was sent flying. That unlucky young man was Bing Qianli from the enforcement team. When the general attacked, his aura suppressed the mountains and rivers. As he moved, his aura surged, causing the space to tremble. Everyone gasped, not daring to get close to him. All the strongest experts on the martial ranking seemed to have an invisible tacit understanding as they took the initiative to attack those with the lowest rankings. Of course, Du Xiaofu's ranking was the lowest, but now he was an exception. No one dared to provoke Du Xiaofu. Du Xiaofu's ferocious reputation had long made the people on the martial ranking wary of him. However, just because no one dared to provoke Du Xiaofu, it did not mean that Du Xiaofu would not make a move. The more points one had, the easier the next round would be. Du Xiaofu naturally did not wish for the next round to be more difficult for him. Looking at the square where the fierce battle had erupted, Du Xiaofu's battle intent surged. A faint golden light spread out from his eyes. Go down. A cultivator at the peak of the pulse spirit realm, close to the late stage, gripped a 5-foot-long saber tightly. The saber radiance burst out and swept across the sky, shattering Ouyang Shuang's sword radiance. The runes scattered, and the energy swept out. A palm print followed, heading straight for Ouyang Shuang's shoulder. Roar! A shocking beast roar was heard. Ouyang Shuang had already withdrawn her sword. She instantly communicated with her martial vein and condensed her vein spirit. A ferocious and mighty crimson cloud two-headed leopard appeared, blocking the opponent's palm. You're still not enough. The former roared and activated the saber in his hand. His cultivation of the peak of the pulse spirit realm, close to the late stage, burst out. He was no weaker than Guoming back then. A large amount of saber radiance tore through the air and swept across the space. Many saber radiance directly hit the crimson cloud two-headed leopard, scattering many runes from its illusory body. Pfft! Ouyang Shuang spat out a mouthful of blood. Her delicate body staggered back, no longer able to fight. Oscillating fist. Du Xiaofu's figure appeared in front of the young man with the saber. His figure floated like a god, unpredictable like a ghost. A fist print directly bombarded the saber that the young man used to block in a panic. Bang, bang, bang. Sonic booms continued. The saber in the young man's hand cracked and was destroyed. Blood spurted from his mouth as his body was sent flying. He was sent flying far away, crashing into the ground. He struggled a few times, but was unable to get up. Rumble. Du Xiaofu attacked again. His body was wrapped in golden light. Wherever his figure passed, a muffled sound of energy was like thunder. One figure after another was sent flying. Wherever his figure passed, no one was able to stop him. Sorry, we meet again. Zhu Ding of the enforcement team was sent flying by Du Xiaofu's punch. Roar! A young man at the peak of the pulse spirit realm activated his pulse spirit, but it was directly shattered by Du Xiaofu's punch. Woo woo! Roar! The two young men at the peak of the pulse spirit realm saw that the situation was not good. They activated their pulse spirits and attacked Du Xiaofu together. Break! Du Xiaofu shouted softly and ignored the two humanoid spirits. With a wave of his hand, he scattered them into runes that filled the sky. Then, Du Xiaofu's figure appeared in front of the two young men. His hands grabbed their shoulders and slammed their bodies together. Bang! Bang! Du Xiaofu showed mercy, but the two young men were still dizzy and spat out blood. Roar! Roar! In the short period of time in the square, there were many roars of beasts. Many students were forced to activate their pulse spirits. For a moment, the pulse spirits filled the sky and roared at each other deafeningly. The pressure spread and occupied the sky. Is he Du Xiaofu who was expelled by the war land? In the elders' seats, the first elder's eyes fell on the young man in purple robes with a broadsword on his back. His white hair moved slightly and his eyes flashed with spirit. First elder, he is Du Xiaofu. Elder, he who said respectfully to the first elder. He is a dual cultivator of talisman Dao and martial Dao. This child is extraordinary and can enter the top 3. In another 2 years, I'm afraid that even the 2 children of the general family and the Gu family will not be able to compare to him. The first elder said softly. Then first elder means that Du Xiaofu will not be able to compete with the general and Gu Xinyan for first place this time? Murongxi asked respectfully. The first elder's eyes were naturally extremely sharp. Perhaps he could already see the final result from this. After all, the difference between the pulse spirit stage and the martial lord stage is huge. Let's wait for the final result. I also look forward to the unexpected result. The first elder said with a faint smile. On his aged face, there was some anticipation in his eyes. What a powerful general! He defeated Jun Yuanhong, the 18th on the martial ranking, in one move. Ghost Child is too terrifying. No one can resist the cold and fierce aura on his body. He is extremely powerful. Wild Bull Mang Hao is also powerful. No one can contend against him. The most terrifying one is Du Xiaofu. He is too fierce. No one can stop him. Around the square, the spectating students discussed animatedly. They watched the battle in the center of the square and the eruption of the astonishing aura, which made their hearts jump. Junior Du is really fierce. No wonder he has such a fierce reputation in the academy. In the crowd, Han Chao was dumbstruck as he watched Du Xiaofu's fierce attacks. Too powerful. Martial Dao and Talisman Dao dual majored. In the entire academy, only the general, Gu Xinyan, and Du Xiaofu are able to do so. Shock gushed out from Bing Na's delicate face. Our weapon department can finally let out a sigh of relief. Tu Tong was very excited. He grinned and appeared to be extremely happy. Not far away, Du Xiaoyao stood on Du Xiaoqing's shoulder as she watched the battle. There was not much fluctuation in her pale golden eyes. Big brother will definitely get first place. The others are too weak. They are not enough. On the other hand, the three old fellows sitting in front are barely enough. But it's still not enough. Du Xiaoqing swept her gaze across the crowd and finally stopped at the great elder, second elder, and third elder of the inner court. However, she did not take them to heart. After hearing Du Xiaoqing's words, Du Xiaoman, Han Chao, Bing Na, and the others beside her could only be dumbfounded. Bang! In the air, Du Xiaofu stomped on the vain soul of a wolf clan demon beast. At the same time, he blasted a peak pulse spirit stage youth, who was almost at the martial lord realm, off the square. Chi-la-la, suddenly, a figure silently appeared behind Du Xiaofu. An invisible chill spread out and permeated the space. A sharp talisman claw appeared out of thin air. Crack crack, wherever this rune paw print passed, the space seemed to be covered with frost. It was as vicious and tricky as a poisonous snake. It appeared behind Du Xiaofu in an instant, and a terrifying and mighty aura suppressed and sealed the space. Boom! The entire space froze. With such a terrifying aura, the attacker was no longer at the pulse spirit stage, but at the martial lord realm. At this moment, there was a martial lord realm cultivator attacking Du Xiaofu, and it was a sudden sneak attack. Humph! Du Xiaofu let out a deep roar and released a domineering aura. A pale golden light was released from his body, and his might was terrifying. Woo woo! Ao ao! Under Du Xiaofu's domineering aura, many pulse spirit beasts in the air roared and trembled for no reason. They were affected and instinctively felt fear. Today's update is complete. Chapter 386. Sky-shaking wings. Du Xiaofu let out a loud shout as he waved his hand. Layers upon layers of golden talisman symbols gushed out like cattail leaf fans or the golden wings of a giant peng. His terrifying aura rushed forward. Dazzling golden talisman symbols poured out like a flood and swept out like waves. Suddenly, with a whoosh sound, they collided with the talisman symbol Ice Claw behind him. Chi-la-la, a terrifying aura erupted. Many of the elders were secretly surprised as they saw the rune Ice Claw directly shatter, turning into runes that filled the sky and spread out. Chi-la-la, amidst the dispersing energy, a young man in white clothes staggered back a few steps in the air. He raised his eyes slightly and looked at the purple-robed man who carried a broadsword on his back not far in front of him. There was some shock in his eyes. Du Xiaofu stood in the air and looked at the young man in white who had just launched a sneak attack. It was the ice python Baichuan. Although his cultivation had not reached the mysterious level of the martial marquis realm, he was still slightly stronger than the overlord spear Qianguyu. You like to attack me? Then I'll do as you wish. A chilling expression appeared on Du Xiaofu's face as he took a step forward and directly headed towards Baichuan. His aura was ferocious and it was clear that he had no intention of letting Baichuan off. Someone had tried to harm him and had not shown any mercy at all. Given Du Xiaofu's character, how could he possibly tolerate such a thing? Bai Yichuan secretly took a deep breath, suppressing the shock in his heart. He was only at the spiritual pulse realm, and there were so many elders by his side. Could this kid really turn the heavens upside down? In an instant, an astonishingly cold aura surged out from Bai Yichuan's body, as if it wanted to freeze the surrounding space. The runes all over his body began to glow, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. "Brat, come at me if you have the ability." Bai Yichuan shouted at Du Xiaofu, who was walking towards him. A cold smile hung on his lips. His aura was also extraordinary. He was ranked 7th on the martial ranking. How could he be ordinary? So what if I'm here? Since you dared to ambush me, you'll have to pay the price. Du Xiaofu didn't care about Bai Yichuan's coldness at all. His figure appeared like a ghost, drifting about like a deity. In an instant, he appeared in front of Bai Yichuan. What a fast speed! It seems to be some kind of unpredictable high-level movement technique. Even the academy can't produce it. Looking at Du Xiaofu's footwork, an old man beside the first elder, who should be the second elder of the inner court, dressed in a plain robe, had a glint in his eyes. He could tell that Du Xiaofu's footwork was not simple. "I'd like to see how you'll make me pay the price today." Bai Yichuan shouted loudly. His ice aura surged, and frost blossomed in the surroundings. The terrifying temperature of the ice seemed to want to freeze the space around Du Xiaofu, binding the space. A fist imprint rushed out, and wherever the fist passed, the surrounding space would emit ka-ka sounds. Frost floated in the air, as if snowflakes were falling from the sky. Runes accompanied the whistling of the cold wind, and the imposing aura was enough to shake one's soul. Scram! Du Xiaofu roared, his 5 fingers clenched into a fist. He didn't evade or retreat, treating the icy aura as if it was nothing. Golden light erupted, unstoppable. His fist was wrapped in golden talisman runes, blazing like golden lightning as it collided with Bai Yichuan's fist. Rumble, the sound of the explosion resounded like thunder. The earth-shattering sound of the energy explosion immediately drew the attention of everyone in the audience. After all, in this intense battle, it was still the experts with the highest cultivation that were cleaning up the weakest. Although everyone who had the qualifications to participate in this competition was an absolute expert, compared to the top-ranked experts on the martial ranking, the true confrontation between the peak experts had yet to officially begin. However, as Du Xiaofu and the ice python Bai Yichuan exchanged blows, it was undoubtedly the start of a confrontation between the peak experts. Naturally, it was enough to attract the attention of all the spectators. The early appearance of such a confrontation had even exceeded everyone's expectations. In the air, Du Xiaofu and Bai Yichuan's fists collided. Runes scattered like fireworks, and a terrifying destructive power swept across the surrounding space. The ground of the plaza below wasn't spared either. Large swaths of bluestone flooring were directly sent flying, and countless cracks appeared as the ground rumbled and shook. A terrifying pressure spread out, causing the hearts of the spectators and the surroundings to tremble. Looking at the aftermath of this terrifying confrontation, how terrifying was such strength? Many people sucked in a breath of cold air. Was this the valiant strength of the peak experts on the martial ranking? It was so terrifying. Stomp stomp, as the terrifying energy swept out, Du Xiaofu's body was forced back several steps. However, he immediately stabilized his body. Chi 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 chi, on the other hand, Bai Yichuan's body was forced back several dozen meters before stabilizing his body. His fist was numb, and one could faintly see blood flowing out from his fist. It was very obvious that he had suffered quite a bit under Du Xiaofu's fist. Looking at Du Xiaofu, Bai Yichuan's gaze grew increasingly gloomy. He slightly lowered his head to look at his fist that was bleeding. His arms slightly trembled, and soon after, it started to hurt. A cold glint flashed across his eyes. Suddenly, an icy aura flourished from Bai Yichuan's body. Runes flashed, and the mysterious runes on his body surged. In the end, it expanded like a balloon. Under the shocked gazes of the crowd, a gigantic shadow of several dozen meters long spiraled around by each one's body. Its entire body was suffused with a white light, and its white scales were dense, giving it a malevolent and mighty appearance. Ice Python, that's by each one's vain spirit. Someone exclaimed from the spectators. The ice python wasn't an ordinary creature. It was rumored that it possessed the bloodline of dragons. Any demonic beast that was related to the dragon clan was extremely terrifying. Baichuan had fused with his vain spirit. At this moment, his entire body seemed to have transformed into an ice python. His entire body seemed to have solidified. If there were claws under his abdomen, he would simply be a huge dragon. A terrifying icy aura overflowed from the gigantic python vain spirit's body. Its entire body flickered with the light of runes, causing frost to dance in the surrounding space. The astonishing icy aura was able to invisibly freeze profound chi and souls. Baichuan's icy cold eyes stared straight at Du Xiaofu. Snake teeth intersected in his mouth, like an icicle, emitting an eerie cold light. Hiss hiss. The moment the terrifying hissing sound rang out, Baichuan was like a real ice python. He displayed the terrifying aura of dragons, suppressing the vast sky. Under the shocked gazes of the crowd, he directly and fiercely charged towards Du Xiaofu. Wherever his body passed, the large expanse of space behind him seemed to be truly frozen. At this moment, Du Xiaofu moved. He raised his head and looked at the gigantic ice python that was almost in front of him. In this short moment, a domineering and terrifying aura erupted like a flash flood. A golden light soared into the sky. The mysterious runes on his body surged. Within the golden light, there seemed to be a golden-winged rock flapping its wings. The vague shadow of the golden-winged rock enveloped Du Xiaofu. The mysterious runes on the golden-winged rock were dazzling, like a rising sun. Boom! A domineering and fierce aura suddenly swept out from Du Xiaofu's body. The mysterious rune wings on his back flapped. Flowing light overflowed and filled the air. He was like a rock flapping its wings, soaring into the 9 heavens. Under the shocked gazes of the crowd, the two collided fiercely in the sky. Rock descends to the 9 heavens, suppress. Du Xiaofu shouted loudly. The golden light that filled the sky bloomed. The wings on his back suddenly flapped, carrying the domineering will of the golden-winged rock race. The wings flapped and swept towards Baichuan in a domineering and powerful manner. At this moment, Du Xiaofu's wings flapped. It was like a rock had descended. The wings flapped and swept across, domineering and fierce. It was as if he was the sole ruler, crushing everything in his path. Rumble, rumble, rumble. Such a collision sounded like thunder in the sky. Rune light burst forth like gorgeous fireworks, causing the entire sky to be resplendent. The astonishing and terrifying power seemed to have a vast momentum that wanted to destroy the surrounding space. A vacuum appeared and was immediately distorted by the rune energy. The astonishing pressure caused the surrounding space to tremble. Chi la la. The stalemate did not last long. In the dazzling light, the mysterious runes of the golden rune swept out. The frost serpent's eyes were filled with fear as it began to be suppressed. Du Xiaofu's figure shot out and suddenly appeared above the frost serpent's head. His fist was wrapped in golden xian qi and the runes were blazing. Under the flabbergasted gazes of the crowd, his fist landed solidly on the frost serpent's head. Boom! Under such a punch, the frost serpent's meridian soul phantom instantly shattered, turning into runes that scattered in the sky. Under the huge force, it shattered inch by inch. Qi La, Baichuan's figure also shot backwards with fear in his eyes. In the end, with a loud bang, his body shot backwards onto the ground of the square and landed heavily on the ground. Numerous cracks spread out in front of the stunned gazes of the people around the square. Pucci, Baichuan's body violently spat out blood. His eyes were filled with fear as his pupils suddenly shrank. A purple-robed figure rushed down from the sky and expanded in his eyes. Finally, under the shocked gazes of the crowd, Du Xiaofu's figure descended from the sky and fiercely stomped on Baichuan's chest. Bai Yichuan's body was stomped into the cracks in the ground. With a caw-caw sound, a large portion of Bai Yichuan's ribs were broken. At this moment, the entire square was silent. Some of the students swallowed their saliva. Junior Du is so strong. Too terrifying. Han Chao, Bing Na, and Tu Tong were so shocked that they could not recover for a long time. Now, you should know how Qin Guyu was defeated. Du Xiaofu's lips curled into a cold smile. He stepped on Bai Yichuan, as if he was ruthlessly stomping on Bai Yichuan's disdain and gloominess. Pucci, Bai Yichuan spat out mouthfuls of blood. His eyes were filled with hatred and fear. At this moment, he finally knew how Qin Guyu was defeated. Unfortunately, it was too late for regrets. Chapter 387. Originally, Bai Yichuan definitely had the strength to charge into the top 10. He himself was also within the top 10 of the martial roll, so no matter what, he would have been able to enter the heavenly martial seal realm for half a year and obtain great benefits. But now, everything had left him. This kid is not just strong, his cultivation method is also extremely shocking. I've never seen such a domineering and fierce cultivation method before. In the elders' seats, the first elder, second elder and third elder were all stunned and shocked, not to mention the other elders. This kid is even more terrifying than his bastard father. She whispered softly. There was a bitter smile on his handsome face. Third brother is no longer the third brother of the past. The Stone City's Du family will definitely rise up in the near future. Du Xiaoman mumbled softly, looking at the domineering and fierce figure in purple robes. The foolish youth who had once been famous in the Stone City was no longer the same as before. He had already transformed and risen up, like a great rock spreading its wings, destined to soar through the 9 heavens in the future. Wang, beside the shrunken martial roll, the low and melodious sound of a bell rang out once again the moment Du Xiaofu stepped on Bai Yichuan. In the center of the square, of the original 100 martial roll students, only 20 remained in the air and on the ground. The remaining 80 people were either lying on the ground, unable to move, or had already retreated in panic. No one dared to stay any longer. The assembly had its rules. Although no one was allowed to intentionally harm another's life, if one did not know what was good for them and voluntarily admitted defeat, then they could only bear the consequences themselves. Of the remaining 20 people, the general, Gu Xinyan, Ghost Child, Wu Kei, Gui Xiaofeng, Wild Bull Manghao, Chasing Cloud Swallow, Yi Feiyu, Li Yuxiao and other veteran experts were among them. Du Xiaofu was not familiar with the other 11 people. Are you alright? Ghost Child's figure appeared beside Du Xiaofu, looking at Bai Yichuan who was still being stepped on by Du Xiaofu. His gaze was indifferent, showing some pity, but there was no sympathy. Bai Yichuan had not listened to advice and had even wanted to launch a sneak attack. This was absolutely what he deserved. What was there to sympathize with? Don't worry, it's nothing. Du Xiaofu smiled faintly and moved his foot away from Bai Yichuan's chest. Asking for humiliation, sigh. The general walked over and looked at Bai Yichuan, who originally had the strength to enter the top 10. At this moment, he could only sigh. He did not pay much attention to Bai Yichuan, who originally had the strength to enter the top 10. He then glanced at Ghost Child and Du Xiaofu and softly said, I never expected the two of you to be so ruthless. Ghost Child looked at the list from afar and smiled faintly, not paying much attention to it. Du Xiaofu followed their gazes and saw that the rankings had been refreshed. First place was Mad Bull, second place was Ghost Claw, third place was himself, and fourth place was General. The fifth, sixth, and seventh places were Gu Xinyan, Wu Kei, and Gui Xiaofeng respectively. Li Yuxiao was also ranked 8th. Du Xiaofu is 3rd. His ranking is indeed high. Even the ice python Bai Yichuan was defeated. What a pity. I really shouldn't have provoked Du Xiaofu. Flaming Hand Pan Yu and Space-Shattering Fist Luo Tianchen are also in the top 20. It seems that these two have improved greatly recently. I didn't expect Qi Yishi to also enter the top 20. Pan Yu and Luo Tianchen were originally ranked 31st and 30th, but Qi Yishi was only ranked 86th. She can be considered a dark horse this time. Qi Yishi was originally extraordinary, but later on, she became quiet. She is naturally not simple. The academy students in the surrounding square discussed animatedly. Du Xiaofu's gaze fell on the martial ranking. Among the top 20, the last one was called Qi Yishi. The 19th and 18th were Luo Tianchen and Pan Yu, respectively. With Luo Tianchen and Pan Yu's cultivation, they were able to enter the top 20. In addition to their recent improvement, it was likely that they were familiar with the general, Gu Xinyan, Gui Xiaofeng, and Ghost Child, who were at the top of the martial ranking. After all, in the Dark Forest, when they were fighting for the mysterious spirit Heavenly Vine, everyone had trained together. When choosing opponents, they would more or less hold back and be biased. In the square, many write-in students went up to the stage and helped those who were severely injured to the point that they couldn't stand up. There were also students who were defeated in the martial ranking who helped each other down the square. In a short time, the entire square was cleared, leaving only the final 20 winners standing in the center of the square. Elder He Who stood up and took a few steps forward. He slightly stretched out his hands and pressed down, suppressing the clamor of discussion. Then, his voice was accompanied by Xian Qi as he said loudly, "In the second round of the finals, the highest ranked will fight the lowest ranked, and so on. According to the rankings, you will choose your opponents. The rules are the same. The final 10 winners will enter the Heavenly Martial Talisman realm to comprehend for half a year. I believe all of you know the benefits of that half a year. Whoever can enter last, show your strength. The second round of the Heavenly Martial Assembly will now begin." Buzz! As Elder He Whose voice fell, the surrounding auras soared into the sky. A deep and resounding bell rang throughout the square. The second round of the finals had officially begun. Whoosh whoosh, almost at the same time, the entire square flickered. Numerous figures flashed in unison, and each of them chose their opponents according to the new rankings on the martial ranking. Kuang Niu's body was covered in a dark green Xian Qi armor. His figure was like a bull as he directly landed in front of a beautiful figure. Qi Qi Qi. As Wild Bull Mang Hao landed on the ground, the entire ground shook. From the spot where his feet landed, the bluestone floor of the plaza began to crack. His aura was ferocious, and his eyes were dazzling as they flickered with light. Looking at the young lady in front of him, he said, "Little girl, you should surrender. Otherwise, I won't hurt you. If not, I won't show mercy to you." The young girl had a youthful appearance. She was precisely Qi Yishi, who was currently ranked 20th on the martial ranking. She was actually only around 16 or 17 years old. She wore a light green dress, and her waist was slim. Her skin was smooth like jade, and her small cherry lips were red without any lipstick. 2 strands of pitch-black translucent hair by her cheeks gently brushed against her face with the wind, adding to her allure. Looking at Kuang Niu in front of her, her nimble eyes moved intelligently, and with a hint of mischief, she said softly, "You have brute force, but you won't be able to hurt me." "Really? Little girl, I must teach you a good lesson today." Kuang Niu Mang Hao roared. His aura was ferocious, and his vigor was monstrous. Like a wild bull, he soared into the sky, and then directly charged towards Qi Yishi. His ferocious aura was terrifying, and like a flash flood, it directly enveloped Qi Yishi. Facing Kuang Niu Mang Hao, Qi Yishi's eyes still blinked. She waved her hand, and her beautiful figure spun, drawing a graceful arc. Her figure rapidly retreated, like a willow catkin in the wind. She seemed to be fluttering in the wind, but in reality, she was ethereal. At least for a short period of time, Kuang Niu wouldn't be able to completely suppress her. Boom! With Kuang Niu and Qi Yishi's attacks, the second round of the finals suddenly erupted. Ghost Child and Luo Tianchen faced each other from a distance. Facing Ghost Child, Luo Tianchen's expression wasn't too good. He could only reveal a bitter smile on his face. "Qi Qi." The time taken to defeat the opponent was still related to the ranking of the new round of the martial ranking. Ghost Child's body was surrounded by a faint black profound chi, and like a liquid, it completely enveloped his body. The endlessly revolving profound chi and dark baleful chi released a faint light, which was extremely strange. He immediately attacked, and a claw print instantly swept across the sky, enveloping Luo Tianchen. Chi, wherever the claw print passed, even the surrounding space would tremble and ripple. Just this aura alone was enough to suppress Luo Tianchen. At this moment, compared to Luo Tianchen, Pan Yu's expression was even uglier. According to the rankings, he was currently facing his old opponent, Du Xiaofu. Looking at Du Xiaofu in front of him, Pan Yu's exquisitely sculpted face had an extremely complicated expression. His gentle and calm temperament was very conflicted. Du Xiaofu looked at Pan Yu, his clear eyes moving slightly as he said indifferently, "The peak of the perfect pulse spirit realm. It seems that after so long, although you have improved a lot, you haven't even broken through the martial lord realm." Hearing this, Pan Yu's expression immediately turned ugly. Back then, when he dealt with Du Xiaofu, he was at the peak of the pulse spirit realm, while Du Xiaofu was still at the pulse spirit realm. Now, he had already reached the peak of the perfect pulse spirit realm, and his improvement was already rapid. However, it was extremely difficult to break through to the martial lord realm. Even if it was rumored that with his talent, he had a great chance of breaking through to the martial king realm in the future, but that was only in the future, not now. He still didn't know how many years that future would be. At least now, facing the gap of the martial lord realm, with his talent, it was difficult for him to step into it. Aren't you also at the pulse spirit realm?" Hearing this, Pan Yu couldn't help but let out a deep snort in his throat. He had never thought that in such a short period of time, the youth he didn't even take seriously back then had already grown to the point where he was the focus of the entire academy, and even the entire empire. And he was also suppressed by the 3 words Du Xiaofu. One could imagine the imbalance in his heart. Boom! As his voice fell, the air around Pan Yu suddenly trembled. Accompanied by a blazing aura, it was as if the entire space was suddenly on fire. A void palm print wrapped in blazing rune light, as if it was a real flame jumping, broke through the air in an instant, directly enveloping and crushing the space where Du Xiaofu was. "You're not strong enough now." Facing the void like flaming palm print sweeping over, Du Xiaofu's eyes slightly raised, and immediately punched out. Golden Xian Qi covered his fist, as if it was unstoppable, directly colliding with the flaming palm print. The dazzling golden light was dazzling, and then heavily collided with the flaming palm print. Boom! Under the gazes of many people, the palm and fist collided, and the space seemed to be about to explode. The runes in the air scattered, like a brilliant sun exploding. Vast and mighty energy swept out violently, and a blazing and domineering energy wind shot into the distant sky. Chapter 388. Pucci, amidst the explosion of energy, Pan Yu's body suffered a heavy blow and was flung 100 meters away. Blood spurted from his mouth as his body fell from the sky and landed on the ground of the plaza, causing the plaza to tremble. Pan Yu's body lay on the ground of the plaza, his right arm cracking and bleeding. The skin on his palm had also exploded and was dripping with blood. Du Xiaofu's punch had shattered his right arm, causing his internal organs to tremble. Pan Yu was unable to resist at all. After struggling several times, he was unable to stand up. In the end, Pan Yu did not stand up again. His eyes were filled with hatred and blood flowed from the corner of his mouth, making him look extremely cruel. At this moment, Pan Yu finally realized that the youth he had looked down on previously would become an existence he could only look up to from now on. Chi. On the martial roll, Guo Xiaofeng's name rose to first place once again, Du Xiaofu was second, and then the general was third. The 3 of them had defeated their opponents first. Guo Xiaofeng had defeated his opponent before Du Xiaofu. Bang bang bang, amidst the dull thuds, a large number of energy sonic booms resounded, causing the hearts of the surrounding students to surge and their blood to boil. In the peak showdown between the top 20, the disparity in strength was actually extremely great. On the entire martial ranking, there were only 10 or so people whose strength could truly step into the martial marquee realm. Among the final 20 people on the martial ranking, almost half of them were still at the pulse spirit realm. However, even at the peak of the pulse spirit realm, there was still a huge gap between them and the martial lord realm. Although the students of Tianwu Academy, especially those on the martial roll, all had the strength to fight against opponents of a higher cultivation level than them, their talents were naturally higher. However, the higher one's rank was, the greater one's talent would be. This was especially true when compared to powerful individuals like Du Xiaofu, General, Ghost Child and Gu Xinyan. They also had the strength to fight against those of a higher level. In comparison, the weaker one's strength was, the more they would be suppressed. Following the general's victory, Gu Xinyan, Ghost Child, Wu Kei, Chasing Cloud Swallow, and Yi Feiyu also defeated their opponents and won. Immediately after, Li Yuxiao's demonic aura overflowed. His long hair fluttered and an astonishing demonic aura surged, causing people to be unable to look directly at him. He defeated his opponent and became the 8th victor. The 9th victor was a black-clothed young man with a pair of pitch-black talisman markings condensed on his back, and it was similar to Du Xiaofu's rock descending to the 9 heavens. He defeated an opponent that had practically stepped into the initial stage of the martial marquee realm and became the 9th victor. Black Eagle Tang Wu, originally ranked 13th on the martial ranking. I didn't expect him to reach the top 10 today. He seemed to still have some strength left in his attack. It seems like he has improved a lot during this period of time, Guo Xiaofeng said softly. I didn't expect this guy to enter the top 10. Li Yuxiao gasped for breath as he looked at Tang Wu, the young man in black who had just won. After defeating his opponent, the black-clothed young man arrived beside Du Xiaofu, Guo Xiaofeng, the general, and Gue Hua, who had all won. Hearing Li Yuxiao's words, his eyes rippled slightly as he said, "You were originally 15th on the martial ranking, but you're already in the top 10. Are you still not allowing me to enter the top 10? He. Li Yuxiao smiled and glanced at Tang Wu. Of course you can. It's best if you can become the champion. Don't discourage me. Being in the top 10 is enough. There will naturally be people fighting for the championship." Tang Wu said indifferently, as if he had no intention of fighting for the championship. At this moment, only Mad Bull Mang Hao and Qi Yeshi had not finished their battle in the entire square. Rumble, amidst the fierce battle, runic attacks in the air caused clouds to surge. Mad Bull Mang Hao was incomparably fierce, but he was still unable to completely suppress Qi Yeshi. I never thought that Qi Yeshi would be able to contend against Mad Bull. I thought that she had fallen into seclusion over the years. Who would have thought that her cultivation and strength did not fall behind? Looking at the fierce battle in the air, the general was moved. Was Qi Yeshi very strong back then? Du Xiaofu looked at the battle in the air and became curious about Qi Yeshi. To be able to contend against Mad Bull Mang Hao, one could imagine her strength, not to mention that she was someone that even the general was moved. She was very strong back then. She even shocked the entire academy. It's just that she wasn't as high profile as you. The general stood with his hands behind his back as he stared intently at the battle in the air. He said to Du Xiaofu, 3 years ago, Qi Yishi stood out from the academy's examination. Back then, he was even younger than you are now, probably only 13 or 14 years old. He even made it onto the martial rankings, but in the end, he rarely showed himself and basically never fought. As a result, people gradually stopped mentioning him in the academy. Back then, she was only 13 or 14 years old when she entered Tianwu Academy. She should be 16 or 17 years old now. Hearing this, Du Xiaofu's eyes were filled with shock. To be able to contend against Mad Bull Mang Hao at such a young age was absolutely terrifying. From the looks of it, Qi Yishi had always been at a disadvantage. Her beautiful figure was like duckweed that was fluttering about under Mang Hao's attacks. However, there was not the slightest trace of panic in her clear and intelligent eyes. In fact, there was even a faint smile on her face. Du Xiaofu looked at the beautiful figure in the air. Her eyes were bright and long. Her face couldn't be considered too beautiful, but her intelligent eyes were extremely lively. Her temperament was unique and unforgettable. She should be holding back her strength. The aura of the girl was mysterious and difficult to see through. However, the more Du Xiaofu probed, the more he felt that she was unfathomable. Everyone in the academy thinks that it's difficult for the general and Gu Xinyan to show themselves. In reality, the one that's most difficult to see in the entire academy is junior sister Yeshi. If it wasn't for this Tianwu assembly, I wouldn't have seen her for an entire year. That girl has always been in seclusion in the Tianwu talisman realm. Even her ranking on the martial ranking was left 3 years ago. Wu Kei pursed her lips and smiled. She was one of the people in the academy who had the best relationship with Qi Yeshi. That girl's progress is very terrifying. Gu Xinyan smiled. In the entire academy, only she and Wu Kei had the most contact with that girl. Rumble, in the air, Mad Bull Mang Hao and Qi Yeshi's palms finally collided. When their palms collided, energy rippled and shot out. Dang dang, Qi Yeshi's seemingly light hand pushed out, but it caused Mad Bull Mang Hao to be forced back. He was in an extremely miserable state. I've said it before. You have brute force, but you can't injure me. Qi Yeshi floated in the air, her light green skirt slightly fluttering. Faint runes fluctuated around her body, giving her a mysterious aura. She had a smile on her beautiful face. Try my meridian spirit. How could Mad Bull Mang Hao admit defeat? He firmly believed that he could defeat his opponent. How could Qi Yeshi contend against him? The dark green armor around his body turned into runes that filled the sky like a rain of light. Mad Bull Mang Hao's hand seals continuously formed as he communicated with his martial vein. His entire body seemed to have turned into a huge bull that was dozens of feet tall. At this moment, Mad Bull Mang Hao was incomparably terrifying. The aura around his body fluctuated as the dark green runes jumped like flames. The huge bull's body seemed to be wrapped in bright divine light. Moo! The bull roared. With a loud roar, thunder rumbled. Accompanied by blazing dark green light, it instantly collided with Qi Yeshi. The demonic bull of Nether Desolation isn't weak. However, the meridian spirit of this demonic bull of Nether Desolation comes from its blood essence. It's only at the Beast Lord realm, so it's a little weak. Looking at the huge demonic bull of Nether Desolation ruthlessly colliding with her, Qi Yeshi's eyes were still bright and intelligent. She had a smile on her face. Just as the huge demonic bull of Nether Desolation was about to collide with her, her figure instantly disappeared in the air. When Qi Yeshi's figure reappeared, she was already on the back of the demonic bull of Nether Desolation. Qi Yeshi's figure stood there, her dress fluttering in the wind. Multicolored light fluctuated around her body, allowing the terrifying aura of the demonic bull of Nether Desolation to erupt. Her seemingly delicate body was like a boulder that could not be shaken. A human and a bull stood in the air. One was ferocious and tyrannical, while the other was gentle and graceful. Both might and elegance coexisted, causing one's heart to tremble and a great visual impact. Moo! Mang Hao roared as the meridian spirit of his meridian spirit exploded with dazzling rune radiance, causing the surrounding space to tremble and distort. However, it was still unable to shake Qi Yeshi. The aura around Qi Yeshi's body changed once again. Her dress fluttered in the wind as her slender figure became graceful and graceful. At this moment, mysterious light runes surged and enveloped her, causing ripples in the hearts of those who looked at her from afar. Suppress! Qi Yeshi shouted. Within the light, her figure gave off an extraordinary and holy aura. With a raise of her wrist, a hand seal instantly fell. Mysterious runes surged out from the hand seal, bringing along a vast aura that covered the sky and earth as it directly suppressed Mad Bull Mang Hao. Rumble, as the palm fell, the meridian spirit of the demonic bull of the nether wasteland around Mang Hao was easily destroyed, turning into broken runes. It was simply unable to contend against Qi Yeshi. Puchi, Mang Hao violently spurted out dark red blood as his body directly fell from the sky and heavily smashed into the ground. Boom! A huge five-fingered palm print that was dozens of feet long appeared on the ground as cracks continuously spread. Shock and fear surged out from Mang Hao's eyes. His deathly pale face was lifeless and he was unable to recover for a long time. Hoo-hoo! At this moment, the surroundings were silent as many people sucked in a breath of cold air. Perhaps no one had expected that Mang Hao would actually be defeated by Qi Yeshi. In the elder seating area, all the elders were shocked. Qi Yeshi's victory was definitely the biggest dark horse in this Tianwu assembly. She was even more of a dark horse than Tang Wu and Li Yuxiao. As for Du Xiaofu, he had already displayed enough strength to enter the top 10. Therefore, he could not be considered a dark horse. Today's update is complete. Chapter 389. What a mysterious girl. She's unusual. I can't see through her at all. In the middle of the elders' seating area, the head elder, second elder, and third elder were also exchanging glances, their aged faces filled with confusion. Even they could not see through Qi Yeshi at this moment. The final top 10 winners were out. General, Gu Xinyan, Ghost Child, Wu Kei, and the others entering the top 10 naturally did not surprise the crowd. Even Du Xiaofu entering the top 10 at this time was a matter of course for many people. However, Tang Wu, Li Yuxiao, and especially Qi Yeshi entering the top 10 was a result that many people were both surprised and somewhat surprised. However, this result was still acceptable. After all, no matter what finals it was, there would always be some dark horses running out. Wang! The low and melodious sound of the bell rang out once more, signifying the end of the finals. The surrounding spectators were all discussing the final 10 winners in the square. These 10 people already had the right to enter the Heaven Martial Talisman realm where time was accelerated to comprehend for half a year. The benefits were obvious. Congratulations to the 10 of you for entering the top 10 today. However, in this Heaven Martial Assembly, a champion will emerge at the end and obtain a weapon personally refined by Vice Principal Zhuge using the ethereal spirit Heavenspan Vine. In the third round, the 10 of you will draw lots to choose your opponents. The result will be half Heaven's will and half strength. Elder He who stepped forward and waved his hand. 2 mentors, 1 male and 1 female, walked onto the square. In the female mentor's hands was a cyan secret half-sized box that was only big enough for one hand to reach in. There are jade lots in the box, each with a number from 1 to 5. If you pick the jade lot with the same number, according to the rules of the competition, you can only choose 4 people to fight in pairs. The last 2 people will fight for the championship. Therefore, among the 5 people who win this round, the winner of the lot number 1 and the winner of the lot number 5 will fight one more round. As for which 2 people will fight in the end, it will depend on your luck. Now, let's draw lots. Elder He whose voice rang out. He did not say much. The rules were also very simple. His voice was laced with profound qi, enough for everyone to hear. It was clear as day. The male and female mentors stepped forward, and the 10 of them began to draw lots. Guo Xiaofeng was the first to reach into the lot box and take out a small jade token. Du Xiaofu was the second. He put his hand into the box and took out a jade card. This kind of matchup relied on half of one's luck and half of one's strength. Whether the opponent he chose was strong or weak, he would only know at the end. Therefore, Du Xiaofu did not have any hesitation. Next, the general was the third to pick a jade lot. Du Xiaofu held the jade tablet in his hand and opened it. On the jade tablet, there was a large red number 5 written on it. His luck is really extraordinarily good. When he saw the number 5 written on the jade tablet, a bitter smile immediately surfaced on Du Xiaofu's face. According to the rules that Elder He who had just mentioned, among the 5 people who won this round, the winner of the lot number 1 and the winner of the lot number 5 would have one more match. In the end, the 4 people who won the lot number 2 would fight each other. After that, the final two people would fight for the championship. Since he had gotten the number 5, even if he won, he would have to fight one more match with the winner of the lot number 1. At the end, any one of the remaining people would have strength that was truly at the peak of the martial ranking. One more match would consume a lot of energy. Even if he won by a hair's breadth in the end, he would be at a great disadvantage in the next round. Whoever got the number 1 and number 5 would naturally have bad luck. The drawing of lots is complete. The 10 of you can show your lot numbers. When Chi-Yi took out the last lot from the lot box, the male mentor said to the 10 of them. Hearing this, the 10 of them opened their palms. In the middle of their palms, there was a lot on the jade tablet. Swish swish, at this moment, many people's gazes were focused on the lot numbers in the palms of the 10 people. Du Xiaofu's gaze swept over, only to see that in the palm of Guo Xiaofeng's hand, there was a number 5 jade slip. The two of them looked at each other, as bitter smiles appeared on their faces. Guo Xiaofeng against Du Xiaofu, General against Yi Feiyu, Gu Xinyan against Wu Kei, Ghost Child against Qi Shi, Li Yuxiao against Tang Wu. The male mentor's voice was mixed with profound energy. As the list of the next matches was spread out, the spectators in the surrounding square immediately began to discuss intensely. In the crowd, Zhang Lu and Ouyang Shuang, who had lost in the first round, had already left the square. They stood together with Du Xiaoman, Du Xiaoqing, Han Chao and the others. The cloud-chasing swallow, Yi Feiyu, is probably going to lose. It will be difficult for him to win against the general. Zhang Lu looked at the 10 people in the square. Her bright eyes were filled with anticipation for the next match. It will also be difficult for Qi Shi to face Ghost Child. Ghost Child is not easy to deal with. Bing Na seemed to be familiar with Zhang Lu, Ouyang Shuang and the others. She also gathered together and discussed. Li Yuxiao against Tang Wu. Their rankings were originally very close. Now, their rankings are about the same. It should be a true fierce battle. Gu Xinyan against Wu Quebec. Both of their cultivations are unfathomable. Wu Kei is not easy to provoke. However, Gu Xinyan is also very strong. She has always been second on the martial ranking. This also shows her strength. Gu Xinyan should have a bigger advantage. Du Xiaoman looked at the 10 people in the square. Her brows were slightly furrowed and her expression was serious. Sister Xiaoman, are you worried that he can't fight against Guo Xiaofeng? Ouyang Shuang asked. Guo Xiaofeng has a practitioner weapon and is extremely strong. He is not easy to deal with. Du Xiaoman was worried for Du Xiaofu. This time, no one will dare to laugh at my weapon department. Junior Du has entered the top 10. Let's see who dares to laugh at my weapon department. Tu Tong was clearly very excited. In the square, the 10 people looked at each other. Li Yuxiao looked at Du Xiaofu and said, "You are number 1, I am number 5. If you and I can win, we will have a chance to fight in the next round. Don't treat me as if I don't exist. If you want to win, you can't even pass me." Tang Wu said to Li Yuxiao without holding back. "We will only know after we try." On Li Yuxiao's smooth and white face, there was a red glow in his deep black eyes. His battle intent surged. In front of the elders' seats, Elder He Who said loudly again, "The 10 of you will begin the battle. Whoever can take first place will depend on your true strength." Wang! As Elder He Whose voice fell, the melodious sound of the bell rang out again. The final battle for the championship of the 10 began again. Whoosh whoosh, the 10 figures flashed and scattered into 5 groups. They each faced their opponent. Waves of aura surged and rushed into the sky. Senior General, go! Go, Senior Xinyan! Go, Senior Du Xiaofu! Loud shouts rang out. The 10 of them all had many supporters. Their shouts gathered together and resounded through the clouds. Li Yuxiao, let's begin. Take out your demon extermination sword. In the square, Tang Wu's black robe fluttered. The profound aura around his body surged. A circle of runes occupied the surrounding space, causing sand and pebbles to fly and faintly distort. The aura was no small matter. It shook one's soul. If you want me to use my demon extermination sword, then let's see if your strength is enough. When Li Yuxiao's voice fell, his dark red robe fluttered. A red glow surged in his eyes. The demonic aura around him was no longer suppressed. It rushed into the sky. His hand seals changed. Suddenly, a series of finger seals swept out. He took the lead. Swish swish, 36 finger seals streaked across the sky. The demonic aura overflowed. The light in the entire space suddenly darkened. The 36 finger seals crisscrossed. Only a blood-black light flickered. The devilish aura was terrifying. It made one's hair stand on end. Swish swish, the 36 finger seals seemed to be piercing through space. Accompanied by an unparalleled pressure, they suddenly enveloped all 36 acupoints around Tang Wu's body. 36 demon fingers are not bad. But it's not enough. Tang Wu shouted. Waves of runes surged like a storm. Accompanied by an unparalleled energy, they swept towards Li Yuxiao's 36 demon fingers. Rumble, as Li Yuxiao and Tang Wu exchanged blows, the whole place immediately erupted. We are going to fight again. Let's begin. Gu Xinyan floated in the air as if she was untainted by the mortal world. Her eyes bloomed with light. Let's begin. Wu Kei floated in the air and smiled. Her beautiful temperament and Gu Xinyan's were like an angel and a devil. The two beauties were the most eye-catching at this moment. Looking at them from afar was a visual pleasure. Swish swish. Two graceful figures, each drawing an arc, suddenly clashed with each other as fast as lightning. The battle between the two women didn't have a huge impact. Instead, there were dazzling and graceful arcs in the air. Large amounts of runes shot into the sky and spread out. Although it's hard for me to win, I will still fight with all my strength. There is no one in Tianmu Academy who will back down. Yi Feiyu looked at the general in front of her. Her beautiful eyes were filled with determination. Profound chi surged under her feet, and her figure soared through the sky like a swallow. Her speed was unpredictable and unimaginably fast. I will also fight with all my strength. As soon as the general finished her words, her imposing figure straightened. An invisible aura that could suppress mountains and rivers suddenly erupted from her body. She threw a punch at the blurry figure in front of her. Although it looked like a simple punch, it sealed the opponent's movements. The blurry figure could only face it head-on. I'll let you make the first move. Ghost Baby looked at Qi Yeshi and spoke gently. However, the aura on her body was faintly fluctuating. There was a hint of baleful aura that was sharp and intimidating. It doesn't matter who makes the first move. In any case, you can't do anything to me. Qi Yeshi's crafty eyes still carried a faint smile. However, there was a slight ripple between her brows. She said to Ghost Baby, however, I don't like the aura on your body. It makes me feel uncomfortable. Chapter 390. Looking at the indifferent expression on Qi Yeshi's face, Ghost Child's pupils shrank slightly. His eyes glowed with a dark light, and his entire being suddenly exuded an indescribable aura of demonic coldness. Is that so? Then I'll make the first move. As Ghost Child's voice fell, black profound energy and runes flashed. His 5 fingers curled slightly to form a claw, and the claw imprint shook the air, enveloping Qi Yeshi with a dark, murderous aura. Let's begin as well. Guo Xiaofeng stood silently, his black hair tied behind his head and a few strands falling to his ears. He looked at Du Xiaofu, his eyes deep and dark as the endless abyss at the end of the universe. It gave one the illusion that they would be sucked in if they looked at them for a while longer. He opened his mouth and said to Du Xiaofu, no matter who wins in the end, there will be one more battle in the end. Why don't we decide victory and defeat in one move? Otherwise, we'll be at a disadvantage if we waste too much energy. Hearing this, Du Xiaofu raised his head slightly, a slight smile on his face. He said, "That's exactly what I was thinking. Then let's decide victory and defeat in one move." Guo Xiaofeng's eyes moved. On his wrists, the crude runes on the Qianluo sword began to ripple. He raised his arms, and the crude runes on his ancient wrists bloomed. Two ancient swords suddenly appeared in his hands. Rumble. Sword light instantly shot out from the two swords. Runes surged, as if wanting to destroy the universe. The sword light grew brighter and brighter, and in the end, it practically enveloped Guo Xiaofeng's entire body. A voice filled with battle intent rumbled out, "One move, fight with all your might. The winner stays and the loser retreats." Du Xiaofu raised his head and looked at the layer of dazzling sword radiance that enveloped Guo Xiaofeng's body. He could feel the power and might within it. Faint golden talisman markings surged, and his body was suddenly enveloped in a golden halo. As the talisman markings surged, it was as if a golden-winged rock was about to fly out from the halo. Facing Guo Xiaofeng, Du Xiaofu, who was originally ranked 5th on the martial ranking, was brimming with battle intent. A faint golden glow covered his eyes as he roared out in a domineering manner, "Let's decide this in one move. Come. Du Xiaofu, let's settle this in one move. I won't hold back." Within the dazzling sword light, Guo Xiaofeng's voice was filled with arrogance. On the Qianluo sword in his hands, sword light runes spread out, causing the surrounding space to faintly distort. A terrifying aura fluctuated, causing the surrounding space to unceasingly ripple like a huge wave. Du Xiaofu's body rose into the air and floated in midair. His body was wrapped in golden light like a golden-winged rock. Many cracks appeared on the ground below under the shocked gazes of many onlookers. These two fellows don't want to waste their profound qi and want to decide the outcome with one move. In the elders' seats, the first elder looked at Du Xiaofu and Guo Xiaofeng. On his aged face, his gaze landed on the golden halo around Du Xiaofu's body. There was some expression in his eyes. This is also the smartest choice. These two little fellows are both extraordinary. One is only at the martial marquee realm and the other is at the spiritual pulse realm. That spiritual pulse realm Du Xiaofu is several years younger. If the two of them were at the same level, it would already be obvious who has the advantage. The second elder said. In his words, he was more optimistic about Du Xiaofu. But this time, it's not a competition of talent, but a showdown of strength. Spiritual pulse realm and martial marquee realm. Du Xiaofu is extremely abnormal, but the outcome is still uncertain. The third elder said. In terms of strength, he was rather optimistic about Guo Xiaofeng. Qianluo sword technique. In a short period of time, Guo Xiaofeng swept through the air and activated his sword technique. The Qianluo sword erupted. A large expanse of sword shadows crisscrossed, and unfamiliar runes bloomed, as if wanting to destroy the universe. Qi la la, the sword shadows and runes poured out like a flood, wanting to pierce through space. The resplendent runes were dazzling, and the mist spread out and enveloped the sky. The imposing aura suppressed the sky, and suddenly, it was like a huge cocoon of sword light, accompanied by a supreme pressure, enveloping Du Xiaofu's head. What a powerful Guo Xiaofeng! The eyes of the surrounding spectators trembled. At this moment, looking at Guo Xiaofeng's terrifying attack power, the eyes of the many elders in the elders' seats were filled with intense ripples. The Qianluo sword itself was a practitioner weapon. Coupled with the extraordinariness of the Qianluo sword technique and Guo Xiaofeng's own strength, how terrifying and fierce was it at this moment? Can Du Xiaofu still resist? Come down. Under such a terrifying and fierce attack, in the hearts of the spectating students, all of them sucked in a breath of cold air for Du Xiaofu. Peng descends to the 9 heavens. Facing that torrential sword light, Du Xiaofu's body bloomed with golden light. The rune wings on his back suddenly condensed, and like a golden-winged Peng descending, carrying the domineering will of the golden-winged Peng clan, the wings directly swept out. Qi la la. In mid-air, ancient sword runes spread out, and the sword light was sharp and fierce, tearing the sky apart. Du Xiaofu flapped his wings out, powerful and domineering. The domineering and terrifying aura overflowed the sky, crushing everything like rotten wood. Rumble. The two of them had decided the victor with a single move. They had used all of their strength to collide. The place where their energies collided was like a thunderclap, and a series of dazzling runic lights burst forth. Amidst the earth-shattering explosion, the space in this area seemed to be on the verge of shattering. The air suddenly became chaotic, and it was difficult to see what was happening. Chilala, not far in the sky, a cloud-chasing demon swallow shadow spirit that was not too big turned into runes and shattered, and then Yifeyu's beautiful figure fell straight from the sky. Dang dang, just as Yifeyu's delicate body was about to hit the ground, she barely stabilized her body and landed on her feet. She took more than 10 steps back, and wherever her feet touched the ground, the bluestone floor turned into powder, and she spat out a big mouthful of blood. I lost, I'm not your opponent after all. Looking at the general who was slowly falling, Yifeyu turned around and left as soon as she finished speaking. She had no regrets, and this result was already within her expectations. At this moment, the general's eyes were fixed on the sky not far away, where the monstrous golden light and the terrifying golden runes were slowly converging. When the monstrous golden light and the terrifying runic sword radiance gradually subsided, everyone in the square raised their heads and looked at the two figures with a swooshed sound. In mid-air, a young man with a purple robe and a broad sword on his back was floating out of thin air. There were several cracks on his purple robe, and the cracks on his shoulders and chest were vaguely moist, as if there was blood flowing out, and his face was starting to turn pale. Guo Xiaofeng stood in mid-air, his robe fluttering, and his face was pale, but he did not look as miserable as Du Xiaofu. Did Du Xiaofu lose? Looking at the two people in mid-air, it seemed that Guo Xiaofeng had won, and Du Xiaofu had lost. I didn't expect Guo Xiaofeng to lose. In the elders' seats, the third elder's eyes were filled with surprise and amazement, as if the three of them had seen it the clearest. Du Xiaofu's cultivation technique is very domineering, like the birth of a ferocious beast. What kind of cultivation technique could be so domineering? The first elder's old face was filled with shock, and the domineering aura just now made even him tremble when he looked at it from afar. In mid-air, under everyone's gaze, Guo Xiaofeng raised his head and looked at Du Xiaofu, a helpless look on his face, and said softly, I lost. Pucci, when his voice fell, Guo Xiaofeng spat out a mouthful of blood, and his face suddenly turned pale. His body staggered and retreated, and his aura became dispirited in a short moment. At this moment, only Guo Xiaofeng knew that it was difficult for him to resist Du Xiaofu's domineering aura that suppressed everything. Just that aura alone was already above him. Thank you for letting me win. Du Xiaofu smiled, and took out a handful of pills from his Qianquan bag, and swallowed them like candy, replenishing the consumed profound qi in his body. Third brother 1. Du Xiaoman's eyebrows relaxed, and her tightly clenched fists loosened slightly. Her face revealed a smile, and it was breathtaking. Du Xiaofu defeated Guo Xiaofeng, too tyrannical. Just now, the aura on Du Xiaofu's body was too domineering, and even the pulse spirit seemed to be suppressed by him, terrifying to the extreme. Du Xiaofu, good job. With Guo Xiaofeng's defeat, the surrounding onlookers burst into an astonishing discussion and cheers. Du Xiaofu's supporters occupied almost all of the registered students and freshmen, and the cheers were definitely the loudest among all the supporters in the square. After all, Du Xiaofu was representing all of the freshmen and all of the registered students. With Du Xiaofu's victory, in mid-air, terrifying runes surged and erupted, and the netherworld qi swept across the sky, shaking the air, and two graceful figures separated upon contact. Chilala, Princess Netherworld's figure was shaken back, and her graceful body was wrapped in dazzling runes. The netherworld qi spread out, and a large amount of rune energy slowly converged. In the end, her face was pale, and she looked at Gu Xinyan, and said with a smile, I still can't beat you, so I won't fight with you anymore. You'd better save some energy to deal with the others, hee, thank you. Gu Xinyan smiled, and her limpid eyes were incomparably pure. Under the red dress, her delicate body was like a jade willow, light and tender. Her long black hair was as shiny as ink, and naturally draped over her waist, forming an attractive curve. Du Xiaofu swallowed the elixir to replenish his qi, and his eyes immediately fell on the battle ring not far in front of him. Li Yuxiao and Tang Wu were fighting fiercely. Both of them were at the early stage of the martial lord realm, and there was not much difference between their cultivation levels. Both of them had extraordinary talents, and the battle was the fiercest. Between the two of them, one was incomparably fierce, and the other was monstrously evil. Their auras collided, and muffled sounds of energy kept ringing, but for a moment, it seemed that neither of them could do anything to the other. Chapter 391. Du Xiaofu was paying close attention to the battle between Li Yuxiao and Tang Wu. No matter who won, they would have to fight him next. Walala, the demon extermination halberd was already in Li Yuxiao's hand. His body was wrapped in a dark red aura, and his long dark red hair fluttered in the wind. The demon extermination halberd was covered in runes, and the handle was shaped like a demon's head, spitting out evil demonic aura. The runes on the halberd shone brightly, connecting with the energy of heaven and earth in a violent manner. Walala, a pair of pitch-black rune wings condensed behind Black Eagle Tang Wu's back, which was similar to Du Xiaofu's golden rune wings. It was as if a real giant eagle had descended, and its aura was incomparably sharp. His bloodline was definitely not low. Continue. The two collided again and separated upon contact. Li Yuxiao's demonic aura filled the sky, his long hair fluttering in the wind. Holding the demon extermination halberd, he was wrapped in a bloody black light, and evil demonic aura surged. Do you think I'm afraid of you? If you want to win, you can't get past me. Tang Wu shouted as the black light around his body soared into the sky. The black runes on his back blossomed with a deep black glow. A pair of black rune wings flapped, distorting a large area of space. The wings flapped and swept away Li Yuxiao's blood-black demonic aura that covered the sky. Demon extermination halberd triple kill. Li Yuxiao shouted, and the demon extermination halberd swept through the air, gathering 3 rays of blade light. The 3 rays of blade light were like 3 roaring demonic blades, and the bloody black runes bloomed like a bright moon, about to turn this space into a demonic land. Xiao xiao xiao. The 3 demonic blades slaughtered heaven and earth, covering Black Eagle Tang Wu as they moved. Black Eagle Tang Wu's eyes focused, and in an instant, his hand seals formed. Runes flashed, and he connected with his martial vein. A huge black-feathered demonic eagle meridian spirit merged with his body, as if he had transformed into a black-feathered demonic eagle. He flapped his wings and moved like a rock, blocking Li Yuxiao's 3 demonic blades. Qi La, the two were in a stalemate in the air for a moment. Black Eagle Tang Wu actually began to destroy Li Yuxiao's 3 demonic blades. His wings flapped, a storm swept out, and his body was like an eagle. His hands were like claws, and the black energy extermination halberd like raging waves. Black Eagle Tang Wu was like a storm. Chi, in the blink of an eye, the claw landed on Li Yuxiao's shoulder. Under the tremendous force, it locked onto Li Yuxiao's left arm. A cracking sound was heard, as if it wanted to crush Li Yuxiao's shoulder. It's over. At this moment, a smile appeared on Li Yuxiao's pale face. The demonic aura of the demonic halberd in his right hand was overflowing. Accompanied by gusts of chilly wind, it was as if dark clouds were descending, covering the heavens and earth. The halberd slashed down from the sky, and the blade light seemed to split the space apart. It was so close that it landed heavily on Tang Wu's black-feathered demonic eagle vein spirit shadow. Qi la la. The blade light shattered the vein soul shadow, and the black-feathered demonic hawk shadow turned into rune fragments. Then, Black Hawk Tang Wu spat out a mouthful of blood as his body was blown away. He only managed to stabilize his body after dozens of meters. Lifting his head slightly, he looked at the demon halberd and said, "You won. Admit it." Li Yuxiao wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. On his left shoulder, the dark red robe was torn, and his shoulder was dripping with blood. Swish swish, several fingerprints tapped on the acupoints on his shoulder to stop the bleeding. Li Yuxiao shook his arm slightly, and a cracking sound came from his shoulder. His dislocated arm was reconnected. Not only did Tang Wu's claw injure Li Yuxiao quite badly, one of his arms was also dislocated by the sharp claws. Looks like this battle is unavoidable. Du Xiaofu raised his eyebrows. Li Yuxiao had won this time. According to the rules, there was bound to be an unavoidable battle between him and Li Yuxiao. Almost at the same time, Li Yuxiao looked at Du Xiaofu. Their eyes met, and both of them had a tacit understanding. Their battle intent was also surging. Rumble, the 10 of them fought in pairs. With Li Yuxiao's victory, there were now 4 winners in the top 5, Du Xiaofu, the general, Gu Xinyan, and Li Yuxiao. The remaining 2, Ghost Child and Qi Yishi, were still in the midst of a fierce battle. Ghost Child's aura was intimidating. Chilly winds blew, and faint cries of ghosts and gods could be heard. He was constantly suppressing Qi Yishi, as though he came from the netherworld. What a powerful Ghost Child! His cultivation technique is too terrifying. It's said that Ghost Child cultivated his clan's Yama scripture. The grade of his cultivation technique is extraordinary. Sensing the intimidating aura from Ghost Child, many of the spectators exclaimed. Under the crushing pressure of Ghost Child, Qi Yishi's beautiful figure was lithe and graceful. Runes spread all over her body, and multicolored light and clouds surged, blocking that terrifying aura. Her delicate body was surrounded by an endless stream of profound energy that was extremely terrifying. At this moment, the general, Gu Xinyan, Du Xiaofu, Li Yuxiao, and all the other elders were paying attention to the battle between Ghost Child and Qi Yishi. Everyone in Tianwu Academy had a rough idea of Ghost Child's cultivation and strength, so there was no need to say anything. But at this moment, Qi Yishi was still able to contend against Ghost Child. This made everyone re-evaluate Qi Yishi's strength. Unable to do anything to Qi Yishi, Ghost Child's handsome face also revealed some anxiety. The light black profound energy around him wrapped around his body like liquid, and a mighty aura surged, cold and frightening. Between the sharp claws, talisman patterns surged out, as if condensing into an especially sinister skull pattern. In the most terrifying manner, it directly swept towards Qi Yishi. These things are too frightening, but they look fun. Qi Yishi was shocked by Ghost Child's rune skull attack, but her eyes were filled with specks of light. She stretched out her slender hand, and a dazzling light surged out. It was as though a divine light had descended, shining on the rune skull. The terrifying skull was imprisoned within the light, and the rune skull was obliterated. Roar! Roar! Suddenly, dark clouds fell from the sky, and a sinister aura swept out. As Ghost Child's hand seals changed and condensed, the phantom of a vain soul covered his body, and a sinister-looking flood dragon hovered in the air. The flood dragon phantom was huge, like a real dragon, but its head was like a skeleton and evil spirit. Its entire body was covered in a faint black light, and when it opened its mouth to roar, black liquid dripped down. Its entire body was glowing, and its aura was astonishing. 9 Abyss Ghost Flood Dragon. The terrifying flood dragon phantom appeared, and many people were shocked. The 9 Abyss Ghost Flood Dragon was a rare creature, and most people would not be able to see it in their entire lives. Roar! Ghost Child's body and the 9 Abyss Ghost Flood Dragon fused together as though they were one. Luster circulated around his body, and frightening runes filled the sky as he swept towards Qi Yishi. 9 Abyss Ghost Flood Dragon, this is the first time I've seen it. It's indeed very peculiar. Qi Yishi had a smile on her face, and her slender hands moved nimbly. Suddenly, a palm print appeared in her palm, and it was as though it wanted to cut through space. It also exploded with boundless resplendent light, and it was as blazing as lightning. Boom! The two collided, and the air shook violently as a shocking energy storm swept out. Roar! The 9 Abyss Ghost Flood Dragon soared into the sky like a huge dragon, and it opened its mouth, and a faint aura rushed towards Qi Yishi. The pungent aura seemed to be able to corrode space, and it was incomparably terrifying as it silently spread out in the sky. Suppress! Qi Yishi shouted, and the runes in her hands suddenly flickered again. A dazzling rune pillar rumbled, and it fiercely resisted the 9 Abyss Ghost Flood Dragon's aura. Rumble. The aura collided, and the space was almost distorted to the point of collapse. The shockwaves were astonishing, and the shockwaves reached hundreds of feet away, making people tremble in fear. Bright Moon Ghost Flood Dragon. The shockwaves surged, and Chi-Yishi's delicate body soared into the sky, outlining an elegant yet seductive curve. A ring of light in her hand was like a bright moon in the sky, and it was silver-white and resplendent. Multicolored light danced in the air, and it erupted with endless runes. Clanging sounds rang out, and it swept towards the 9 Abyss Ghost Flood Dragon. Chi-la-la, the bright moon light was like a blade, and the 9 Abyss Ghost Flood Dragon was immediately cut open. The runes shattered, and then they shattered one after another. Huff huff, as the rune of the 9 Abyss Ghost Dragon vein shattered, many of the elders in the elders' seats sucked in a breath of cold air. The first elder, second elder, and third elder, who were seated in the middle, were all visibly moved. Ghost Child has been defeated, and Chi-Yishi has won. This result also shocked the surrounding people to the point of disbelief. After Kwang Nyo's defeat, Ghost Child, who had always been ranked third on the martial ranking and whose strength was right behind Gu Xinyan and the general, had actually fallen into Chi-Yishi's hands. This was just too unbelievable. Pfft! Blood spurted out of Ghost Child's mouth, and his body fell directly. He almost fell to the ground, and he staggered back with a pale face. Raising his head to look at Chi-Yishi, who was descending gracefully, Ghost Child's eyes fluctuated, and he sighed. Finally, he said softly, "I've lost." Chi-Yishi smiled and didn't say much. Her gaze then swept past the general, Du Xiaofu, Gu Xinyan, and Li Yuxiao, who had already won. However, in the end, Chi-Yishi's gaze lingered on Du Xiaofu for a while, whether it was intentional or not. It seemed that the impact of Chi-Yishi's victory was too great. After a while, Elder He Who stood up and said, "According to the rules of the competition, the others can rest on the side. Li Yuxiao and Du Xiaofu will fight in the finals. The winner will enter the top 4 and fight for the championship. I hope you can win. I'm still waiting to fight with you." The general patted Du Xiaofu's shoulder, and his figure flashed, and he immediately retreated. Whoosh! Whoosh! Following the general's figure, Gu Xinyan and Chi-Yishi retreated together. At this moment, the atmosphere in the square was tense for no reason, as if a storm was coming. Today's update is complete. Chapter 392. Whoosh whoosh. Following the general's figure, Gu Xinyan and Chi-Yishi both retreated. At this moment, the atmosphere in the square was tense for no reason, as if a storm was brewing. Du Xiaofu and Demon Halberd Li Yuxiao. Who would have thought that these two ferocious fellows would meet again? Li Yuxiao entering the top 5 this time is really unexpected. Although he didn't meet Ghost Child, Wu Kei, Gu Xinyan and the others, it's still enough to show that his strength is astonishing. I heard that when the enforcers were pursuing Du Xiaofu the last time, Li Yuxiao had exchanged blows with Du Xiaofu. I wonder what the result will be this time. As the two stood facing each other in the square, many of the academy's students in the square began to whisper. Facing these two experts who had both charged into the top 5, it really wasn't easy to determine who would win in the end. In the midst of the discussion, on the rather messy but extremely spacious square, a thin figure with a broadsword on his back and a tall figure in a dark red robe faced each other. Boom! Li Yuxiao's demon halberd appeared in his hand. Evil demonic aura surged, sweeping away the shattered stones on the ground. He raised his head slightly, battle intent surging in his dark red eyes, gradually burning. Looking at Du Xiaofu, he said, "Finally, there's a chance to have a good fight." Faint golden Xian Qi surged around Du Xiaofu's body, blocking the evil demonic aura that Li Yuxiao had swept out. His clear eyes were surging with battle intent. Looking at Li Yuxiao, he squeezed his golden eyes and a domineering aura surged. He said, "Let's do it. Go all out, I won't hold back." "Me too." As their voices fell, an evil demonic Xian Qi and a domineering Xian Qi surged out from their bodies, enveloping the two like a storm. The two auras fluctuated, and the spectating students who were closer to the square felt the Xian Qi in their bodies stagnate, their hair standing on end. The two of them are so strong. Are they really going to fight with their full strength? Sensing the aura emanating from the two of them, many of the surrounding students' eyes trembled. Just the aura of their cultivation and strength was not something they could touch. As the evil devil Xian Qi wrapped around Li Yuxiao, the aura around Li Yuxiao's body soared. Waves of evil devil Xian Qi surged within his body on his bright and clean face. Dark red runes shot out from his body, dazzling and eye-catching. In an instant, the evil devil Xian Qi rose on the surface of his body like a flame. His body also started to expand in a short period of time. In a short period of time, Li Yuxiao's body had more than doubled in size. Dark red runes covered the surface of his body like pieces of scales. Even his head was covered. His entire body seemed to be covered by dark red scales, turning him into an evil devil giant. Walala, at this moment, the aura around Li Yuxiao's body rose to the extreme. Runes flashed, and when the evil demonic aura fluctuated, the surrounding space faintly distorted. The demonic art of assimilation. This guy is actually using the demonic art of assimilation at full power. At the edge of the plaza, the general's eyes were moved when he saw Li Yuxiao's astonishing appearance. Light blossomed in Gu Xinyan's beautiful eyes. Her delicate face was filled with shock as she said, fully activating the demon transformation art will cause one's strength to soar. However, it will also cause quite a bit of damage to one's body. It seems that Li Yuxiao has already used his trump card in advance to deal with Du Xiaofu. Du Xiaofu looked at Li Yuxiao. Looking at Li Yuxiao's enormous body that was currently expanding, hand seals quietly formed in his hands. An ancient aura rippled out from his overbearing aura. Demon transformation art, demon transformation. Finally, Li Yuxiao made the first move. After demonizing, his eyes were filled with a berserk sharpness. With a loud roar, he completely suppressed the hostile atmosphere. Tightly grasping the demon transformation sword in his hand, his enormous body soared into the sky. Like a demon god, he directly charged towards Du Xiaofu. Rumble, wherever the enormous demon god's body passed, gales would blow and energy would surge. Faintly, there seemed to be black demonic lightning interweaving. His aura suppressed the vast sky and collapsed space, causing everyone's heart to tremble. Demon Transformation World. With the demon transformation sword in his hand, Li Yuxiao waved it. Demonic light immediately swept out like a tidal wave, surging and sweeping in all directions. The terrifying demonic aura submerged a large area. The demonic aura was terrifying. At this moment, Li Yuxiao was like a demon god that had descended, causing people's hearts to tremble. The terrifying aura instantly swept in front of Du Xiaofu. Terrifying gales surged, causing Du Xiaofu's purple robes to flutter. He lifted his head to look at the demonic aura that had submerged the space in front of him. Dazzling symbols immediately gushed out from the golden light around his body. They were just like divine light. Suddenly, 17 array flags were formed in his hands. Astonishing fluctuations spread from the 17 array flags. It was as if all the energy in Du Xiaofu's body was being sucked into the 17 array flags. His resolute face was completely pale. Swish swish, Du Xiaofu moved. With a wave of his hand, the 17 array flags immediately swept forward. They wrapped around the space in front of him with lightning-like speed and trajectory. Waves of whooshing sounds rang out as the 17 array flags swept into the sky in front of him. A mysterious aura faintly seeped out from the 17 array flags as they were tightly connected. Crouching Tiger Roaring Sky Array. The 17 array flags transformed into dazzling symbol light pillars and disappeared. Intense fluctuations immediately appeared in the sky. Dazzling symbols spread across the sky, causing the entire space to rumble and tremble. In a short period of time, an astonishingly huge formation appeared in the sky in front of everyone's gazes. The terrifying pressure that faintly spread out from the formation caused the expressions of the students of the academies around the square and even the elders on the elders' seats to change. Crouching Tiger Roaring Sky Array, a 5-star elementary talisman array. This guy seems to only be a 4-star profound talisman master, but he's actually able to set up a 5-star elementary talisman array. In the middle of the elders' seats, the great elder's gaze was filled with shock. A 4-star profound talisman master was able to set up a 5-star elementary talisman array. This required an enormous amount of mental energy and understanding of talisman arrays. The support of boundless energy was also indispensable. I didn't expect Junior Do to be a talisman master as well. He's even able to set up a 5-star elementary talisman array. This is too shocking. In the crowd, Han Chao, Tu Tong, and the others were filled with astonishment. Following the appearance of the astonishing array, the entire array enveloped the space, causing the sky to tremble violently. Walala, talisman scripts filled the sky as if the sun was in the sky. Boundless energy light twisted and condensed within the array before finally transforming into the shadow of a ferocious giant tiger that was about to pounce. The Crouching Tiger Roaring Sky Array was a 5-star elementary offensive talisman array. It was something that Du Xiaofu had comprehended and cultivated in the Heavenly Martial Talisman realm some time ago. For the Heavenly Martial Assembly, Du Xiaofu had no choice but to make more preparations. Roar, the giant tiger roared as its might surged like a living creature. Its entire body was filled with an ancient aura that suppressed the vast sky. Its might made people tremble with fear. What a horrifying array! I didn't expect Du Xiaofu to be able to set up such a horrifying array. In midair, the giant tiger's shadow rushed out and collided with the demonic chi that filled the sky almost like lightning. In the end, it was like two terrifying storms, bringing with them an unparalleled impact force as they fiercely collided with each other. Walala, the horrifying energy storm of talisman scripts instantly shot into the sky. The talisman scripts scattered in all directions, turning into circles of energy ripples that spread out in midair. After reaching a certain point, they automatically annihilated and disappeared. The violent energy spread out, and the demonic chi was also bound within it. The demon extermination sword wanted to kill the giant tiger's shadow. Monstrous black light shot out, but it was also suppressed. The giant tiger's shadow occupied the vast sky and collided with the demon extermination sword. A horrifying force swept out, causing the space to tremble violently. With such a horrifying energy pressure, the air in the surrounding space of the square was also crushed and scattered, forming a vacuum. Qi La. In front of Li Yuxiao's huge demon god body, Du Xiaofu's figure appeared like a ghost. A kitchen knife suddenly appeared in his hand and directly slashed down. The monstrous blade light expanded in Li Yuxiao's huge eyes at this moment. It carried an unparalleled aura and shot down like a cannonball, ruthlessly hitting the rune scales on Li Yuxiao's body, accompanied by dazzling runes that shot into the sky. Ka. Under the huge force, Li Yuxiao's huge body trembled, and the rune scales on his body began to crack. Puchi. As the rune scales on his body shattered, Li Yuxiao spat out a mouthful of dark red blood. His aura stagnated, and the giant tiger's shadow in front of him took the opportunity to ruthlessly suppress his body. Bang bang bang. Low muffled sounds rang out one after another, like endless thunder. The rune scales on Li Yuxiao's body completely shattered inch by inch. As the rune scales shattered, Li Yuxiao's body gradually became smaller and smaller, and finally returned to its normal size. Like a bird with broken wings, he ruthlessly fell to the ground in the square. Ka. Under the horrifying impact, where his body landed, large pieces of gravel burst out, and cracks spread out on the ground. In midair, the giant tiger's shadow disappeared, turning into runes and returning to Du Xiaofu's body. Everything gradually calmed down. On the ground, the demon extermination sword in Li Yuxiao's hand also fell to the ground. His body struggled a few times before he managed to stand up. His body was trembling and his face was as pale as ash. He was in an extremely sorry state. He looked up at Du Xiaofu in the air and said, "I've lost." Chapter 393. Du Xiaofu has won again, entering the top 4. The demonic assimilation art was activated by Li Yuxiao with all his might. After demonification, he paid the price of his own body, but still lost to Du Xiaofu. This is not surprising. If Du Xiaofu was not a formation symbol master, he would not have been able to do anything to Li Yuxiao either. This is the terrifying aspect of dual cultivation in the way of talismans and martial arts. However, most people do not have the talent for dual cultivation in both. Even if they had such terrifying talent, it would still be difficult for them to be proficient in both. Well done, Senior Du, you are the pride of us registered students. Senior Du, us new students will always support you. Shocked shouts and discussions erupted from the surrounding plaza, immediately resounding throughout the entire place. Following Du Xiaofu's victory once again, he had undoubtedly firmly captured the hearts of all the registered students and the majority of the new students. As a registered student and a new student of this year, he had entered the top 4 of the Tianwu University Assembly. This kind of result was definitely unheard of among the previous batches of new students. It was enough to make all the registered students and new students chase after him with fanatical admiration. Humph! Du Qi stood quietly among the new students. His throat emitted a deep and indifferent snort. His aura was elegant and his tall and straight figure caused his entire being to appear even more handsome. However, at this moment, both eyes on his handsome face were looking at the purple-robed figure on the open ground. His eyes revealed a cold and indifferent expression. So powerful. I'm afraid that even Big Brother and Second Brother did not have such strength at this age. Too powerful. Du Yunxin stood silently beside Du Qi, not minding the cold indifference on his face. Her rosy and moving face, her eyes were moist and her voice soft. How valiant! In the elders' seating area, many of the elders were deeply shocked. Du Xiaofu's figure landed on the plaza. The aura on his body was rather weak as he directly pulled out several pills from his Qianquan bag and stuffed them into his mouth. He even secretly stuffed a few spirit medicines into his mouth and swallowed them. Buzz! The melodious sound of the bell rang out once again, and Elder He whose voice once again resounded through the square. Congratulations to the 4 of you for entering the top 4. Next, we will continue to draw lots for the duels. Du Xiaofu has just finished a duel, so he can rest for a while. The other 2 will fight first. The 4 of them went up the stage, and the male and female instructors once again brought over the lot box for the 4 of them to draw lots. Can you still do it? If you're up against me later, I won't hold back. The general was the first to draw. In his palm, there was a jade tablet with the number 1 written on it. Du Xiaofu drew his lot and looked at the jade card in his hand. It was number 2. He smiled and said to the general with regret, "Unfortunately, I'm afraid we won't be able to fight." The general looked at the number on the jade token in Du Xiaofu's hand. His tall and sturdy figure and his skin had a faint bronze color. He raised his eyebrows and said, "There is a chance. If you and I can win, we can still fight in the next round. I'm number 1. As soon as the general finished speaking, Qi Yeshi's sweet voice sounded. She held the jade tablet in her hand and looked at the tablet in the general's hand. Then, she looked at Du Xiaofu and said, "What a pity. I hope you can defeat Sister Xinyan. I actually want to fight against you the most. I can feel that the qi on your body is not ordinary. It's very mysterious." "Yeshi, are you saying that you want me to lose?" Gu Xinyan smiled. There was no need to draw lots anymore. Qi Yeshi had gotten number 1 and was going to fight against the general. Naturally, Gu Xinyan was going to fight against Du Xiaofu as well. "Sister Xinyan, that's not what I meant. I just feel that the qi on his body is very mysterious." Qi Yeshi smiled at Gu Xinyan and blinked her eyes. It seems like the general is going to fight against Qi Yeshi and Gu Xinyan is going to fight against Du Xiaofu. That's interesting. As the 4 people on the square finished drawing lots, the surrounding universities also noticed some clues. The general is going to fight against Qi Yeshi and Gu Xinyan is going to fight against Du Xiaofu. That kind of battle is definitely surprising. Everyone is very curious about the result. The general and Gu Xinyan were the 2 strongest cultivators on the martial ranking list for a long time. They were both very strong cultivators. Now, the 2 of them were facing Du Xiaofu and Qi Yeshi. Both of them could be considered as dark horses in this year's Tianwu Assembly. 2 veteran experts on the martial ranking against 2 rising dark horses. Everyone couldn't help but look forward to the outcome of this battle. Interesting. It's getting more and more interesting. In the elders' seats, the Great Elder, Second Elder, and Third Elder's aged faces were also filled with anticipation. After the 4 people finished drawing lots, Elder He Hu looked at the 4 people on the square and announced at an inappropriate time, "The drawing of lots is complete. The allocation of the battle is complete. The general will fight against Qi Yeshi. Gu Xinyan and Du Xiaofu, step back." Whoosh whoosh, as Elder He Hu's voice fell, Du Xiaofu and Gu Xinyan stepped back. Only the general and Qi Yeshi were left on the square. The battle for the top 2 begins now. Elder He Hu's voice rang out. In the next moment, the general and Qi Yeshi's qi gushed out. Their faint profound qi surged and wrapped around their bodies. The atmosphere in the surrounding space suddenly became tense. Looking at the 2 people on the square, the fiery battle intent that gradually filled the air. The noise in the square automatically quieted down. The last few battles would definitely be the true pinnacle battles. A pinnacle battle was about to begin. It was hard to guess who would win and who would lose. At the edge of the square, Du Xiaofu looked at the 2 people on the square. The golden-winged rock clan's cultivation technique was circulating in his body. He refined the energy of the pills and spiritual herbs to recover his profound qi. Gu Xinyan stood gracefully like a jade willow. Her beautiful eyes were smiling as she looked at Du Xiaofu. She said softly, "What do you think of the battle between the 2 of them?" Me, Du Xiaofu smiled slightly. He stood casually and lazily as he looked at the 2 people on the square. He said, "I really can't tell. The general seems to have not used his full strength. But Qi Yeshi is too mysterious. It's hard to guess. What do you think?" Du Xiaofu shrugged. The purple gold heavenly tower on his back was crushed like a 1,000-pound boulder. Du Xiaofu carried the purple gold heavenly tower on his back every day. He did not dare to take it off. It was fine at first, but it became more and more difficult. It was like an ordinary person carrying a boulder. It might be fine for a few hours, but after a long time, it became more and more difficult. But now, Du Xiaofu felt a little numb to the purple gold heavenly tower on his back. He was even gradually getting used to it. The most difficult time had passed. He could only carry it on his back for fear that he would not be able to suppress the soul of the murderous weapon. Hearing Du Xiaofu's words, Gu Xinyan's eyes moved slightly. She replied, "I can't tell either. The general is very strong. But junior sister Yeshi is too mysterious. I can't see through her, so I don't dare to make a judgment." Boom! While Du Xiaofu and Gu Xinyan were talking, the 2 people on the square had already started fighting. A delicate body and a stalwart body suddenly collided. Powerful profound qi collided. Muffled sounds of energy colliding rang through the square. Bang, 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 both of them went all out as soon as they made their moves. At this time, no matter who won, they still had to face the next battle for the championship. Both of them had already thoroughly warmed up after several rounds of confrontation. Therefore, they went all out as soon as they made their moves, striving to defeat their opponent quickly. Especially for the general. Even if he won, it would be very difficult for him to deal with Gu Xinyan or Du Xiaofu. The general naturally knew Gu Xinyan's strength the best. She had never been weaker than him. Gu Xinyan had never really competed with him for the ranking on the martial ranking. The ranking could not represent her true strength in the end. The general was also well aware of Du Xiaofu's ferociousness. That ferocious fellow had always been unfathomable and was definitely a difficult person to deal with. Therefore, the general hoped that he could end the battle quickly against Qi Yeshi. The general rushed forward. An aura that could suppress mountains and rivers erupted. Profound qi surged as he attacked with all his might. Qi Yeshi was also mysterious. No matter what the reason was, the general did not dare to be careless. Seal of mountains and rivers. A palm print condensed in the general's hand. It was accompanied by a resplendent light that caused the space to tremble. Vast rune energy swept out like a surging mountain torrent. The palm print instantly enveloped the space and suppressed Qi Yeshi as if it was suppressing mountains and rivers. Qi Yeshi's expression turned serious. Runes flashed around her body. Light surged on her slender hand. A jade-white palm shot out with a vast force and collided with the general's seal of mountains and rivers. Hula, when the two collided, a rune storm was formed. It swept out like a hurricane, faintly shattering the space and distorting it. So powerful! The general was truly shocked at this moment. After exchanging blows, he finally understood how strong Qi Yeshi was. His full-strength palm strike was actually unable to gain the slightest advantage. It seemed like Qi Yeshi had not used her full strength when facing Mang Hao, Nine Nether Jr., and Ghost Baby. In a short moment, the general soared into the air, his hand seals changing rapidly. He seemed to have been prepared for this. His hand seals condensed, and 17 formation flags appeared in his palm. With a wave of his hand, the 17 formation flags swept through the air, and in an instant, accompanied by the sound of breaking wind, they disappeared in front of him in a mysterious way. You're tuning into the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.